Call to order work session of Goodyear City Council, 15 May 2006. All council members are in attendance. We have 3 items on our work session agenda, all for discussion only. No action can or will be taken. First item is to receive information on the request from Maricopa County Manager to participate in the capital campaign for the Regional Human Services Campus. Jereen Watson, I think. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is a little different.
There's no way to
There's no way to pull that, is
It's
it?
pretty much
Just
stuck.
to hold it.
Okay. Okay, can you hear me okay? The information before you tonight is about the Human Services campus that's being built in downtown Phoenix, and I have given you the information ahead of time, but I would like for Linda Muscatel from the County Manager's Office to come. She has a PowerPoint presentation tonight, and she would like to be able to present the message from the County Manager for you, if that's okay. Linda?
This is going to be tricky, flipping PowerPoints. Oh, okay, I appreciate that. Actually, on behalf of not just Maricopa County, but on behalf of all the participants in the Human Service Campus and its supporters, oh, wonderful. Thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to you tonight. I will try to make this brief. I'll give you a little bit of background on the campus, talk a little bit about the economic impact, not just in downtown Phoenix, but throughout the county and for the taxpayer in general, and then get down to the nitty-gritty of the capital campaign, which I'm sure you're interested in. I understand this is a little bit of a new setup. Let's see if we can.
You've got the microphone in your hand there.
Oh, this is the mic. This should be my. I should move my slides along. Let's try this one. There we go. This is probably not new information, but we have between 12 and 14,000 homeless individuals in the Maricopa County area in any given year. Of those, we know that the chronically homeless, those that have been on the street for a long time, of those, anywhere between 1,000, perhaps 1,200 can be found in downtown Phoenix on any night, either in shelters or on the street. And these men and women hail from throughout Maricopa County. In our metropolitan areas, and probably any city in the world, that population does tend to gravitate to the core of an area. The feds are not responsible for this population. The state is not responsible. No local government is mandated to take care of this population. And with our regional approach, what's actually happened is all 3, plus the private sector, have decided to embrace this issue and collaborate to make something happen to affect change. We see the campus as both a compassionate community response. It's the right thing to do, but we also know it has a very positive economic impact, not just on downtown development, but on deferred costs, which I'll talk about in a minute. And for those of you who are engaged in the MAD planning process, this is a key element in the Continuum of Care's regional plan to end homelessness. There are 5 anchor participants rooted in campus right now. They're up there. Very briefly, it's Central Arizona Shelter Services, which you probably know better as CAS, which does emergency shelter and other services. Maricopa Healthcare for the Homeless Program, which is a primary health care clinic doing medical and behavioral health care. Nova Safe Haven, which will be a new emergency shelter for chronically homeless folks who are also seriously mentally ill, an extremely vulnerable population. St. Joseph the Worker, which does job development and training, and St. Vincent de Paul, who does dining services and has been in that area for over 50 years, as has many of these agencies. What makes, whoops, we've lost it. There we go. What really makes this a unique arrangement, besides the collaborative effort among the providers, is there is an element, the Lodestar Day Resource Center, which not only has a presence of the anchor agencies, but many, many other agencies that touch the homeless are all sited under one roof. So not only does outreach happen from that core area, but when someone is ready to engage in service, service can be shaped around his or her needs. And with multi-agencies under one roof, with a vanilla presence for the guest on campus, we really have broken down bureaucratic barriers to care. We were so concerned that this was a new approach, that this system was actually piloted for 18 months prior to the opening of campus to assure its completion. Construction is happening in 2 phases. The first phase is done, and the 4 elements you see on the screen are already built and became operational in November, so we're really marking its first 6 months of operation this month. Phase 2 construction actually is initiating tomorrow. I think most of the council and the mayor received invitations to that groundbreaking. That is the last element, and that should be completed by January of '07. I've dropped this in just to give you an idea of how these agencies array on this 11-acre parcel. Number 1 is the last building to go up, and that replaces very decrepit primary care clinic and the old cash shelter. And please interrupt with questions as I go. I know a lot of you can't get down there, so I've just tried to give you a feel of what the campus looks like. This is the new St. Vincent de Paul dining facility. It's an inside view of its kitchen. This is the Lodestar Day Resource Center, an external view of that. This is just a view of some volunteers working internal to that. This is an outside view of Central Arizona Shelter Services, which formerly double bunked in a very, not very hospitable way. It's homeless individuals. It's now single bunked. It is divided into levels, and people get increased privacy and comfort as they move through those levels. It's really quite a remarkable shelter and a national model. This is an inside shot of the Cass Dental Clinic with its dental director, Dr. Chris Volchek. It is a state-of-the-art clinic. If we had more time, I'd tell you how Dr. Volchek finessed that to have suppliers literally outbidding each other to make it a state-of-the-art clinic. It's wonderful. And, of course, you can't go to work if you're in pain. You can't go to school if you're in pain. You can't get a job if you cannot smile. It's really made a great difference in people's lives. And this is just a look of an exam room in the healthcare clinic. In the old facility, we were literally converting bathrooms into more client space. This now has 8 exam rooms. And this is our medical director at Healthcare for the Homeless, Sister Adele O'Sullivan, who is this year's Family Practice Physician of the Year from the American Academy of Family Physicians, and also won one of Reader Digest 100 Good Samaritan Awards. Quite a remarkable lady that really represents the spirit of that whole campus. There are so many more like her there. This is just a quick review of some of the successes achieved within the first 6 months of the campus's operation. More than 240 folks in housing. When you have a roof over your head, you are no longer homeless. It's that simple. More than 300 individuals have gained employment. Many, many dental and medical appointments, and 12,000 meals served, including a breakfast program which St. Vincent de Paul added. It's the first time they've ever done that. They're now serving a breakfast on campus, which is wonderful. The cash shelter is filled to maximum capacity every night. And as you will see in a minute, many more expensive contacts have been avoided because of this array of services on campus. And notably, the Phoenix police that work that area, and some of them probably know the clientele as well as anyone, are reporting a real reduction in their demand. They're delighted with the outcome of the campus. Briefly, economic revitalization of the downtown and all other areas in the outlying communities where chronically homeless tend to cluster is enhanced by having this integrated campus on site. And as I mentioned, the alternatives to more expensive settings are enormous. I don't know if you can see that on the slide, but just for an example, a shelter day is about $22.50 a night. in an emergency shelter. If these folks were seen in jail, it would be twice that. If they were seen in prison, it would be 4 times that. The health care clinic avoids emergency room contacts and avoids acute inpatient days, and I believe you have that in your handout. You can see the relative cost. A night at Nova Safe Haven at about $58 compared to a psychiatric inpatient day. And actually, $280 is probably a long-term hospital stay, and acute stay would be much higher. So I know it's very hard to quantify the cost you don't have, but I think it's clear that this is a much more cost-effective, to not say more humane way to treat the problem. The Capital Campaign has a committee comprised of our county manager, David Smith, one of our supervisors, Supervisor Mary Rose Wilcox, and Mr. Marty Schultz from Arizona Public Service, really representing the public and private sectors. Each of the provider CEOs takes a very active role in the campaign, as do I and many other community supporters. The committee always said, we're going to make this a 50-50 public-private partnership. And I think the sense was, you can't do it. It's not going to happen. I'm happy to report, in conflict with what you're seeing at your place, that as of tonight we really have hit the $22 million mark. Remarkably, 13 plus of that, 13.8, is from the private sector. That's your businesses, your banks, your sports team, your philanthropic organizations, individuals at $5 a pop. And the balance of that, about the 8.2, is from the public sector. As I said, we're at 22. The reason we're showing about a $5 million gap is we know we have increased construction costs from the time this project was bid, because of the increased costs, as everyone is aware of material and of labor. Another piece of that gap is interest. The county wanted to assure that we wouldn't have a stop-and-go development of this campus, and they took out a credit line with National Bank of Arizona to cover both the multi-year commitments from some of our major givers, people giving us $3+ million a year, staggering it over time, and to shorten the gap in what we need to raise. As we accelerate our fundraising and can reduce that interest cost, we can take $1 million off the table of that gap. And as I said, that gap is actually closer to $4.5 million as of tonight. So I would hope that by the end of the summer, I could say to my Board of Supervisors, we have a $3.5 million gap and we're making great headway. Dave Smith went to MAG, both to the Regional Council and to the Management Committee, to ask for the cities and towns in the county to participate in this construction project, since it does serve individuals from throughout Maricopa County. We knew we couldn't go and say, let's take a percentage of utilization and drive that up against a $26 million project cost. That would come out with an awfully big number. So he instead said, let's ask collectively for $1 million. Let's look at a per capita kind of pro rata allocation. And in this case, you know, it's around $19,000 for the city of Goodyear. In addition, because he realizes there's different budget situations and our board is very supportive of this, there's always the option of even spreading that particular ask over multiple years, if that works better for a town, city, or a town. So that, in summary, is what we're about. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have to the best that I can.
Thanks very much. And before we do that, very good briefing.
Thank you.
Anyone from the public wish to make a comment or have a question? Okay, Councilmember Scott.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. Very informative. I have some questions, though. You emphasize the medical and dental care that these folks will receive. As you know, a significant percentage of homeless people have psychiatric and or drug-related problems, and that's your biggest problem to contend with now. With Nova Safe Haven, do you have adequate psychiatrist staffing this to take care of this population?
Let me explain how that is addressed, and it's actually addressed in multiple ways. In the Day Resource Center, among the agencies that reside underneath that roof are included value options, the county's REBA, Southwest Behavioral Health, which is a contractor that provides behavioral health services. Healthcare for the homeless also has psychiatrists on staff, and then, of course, Nova Safe Haven brings psychiatrists to bear. So there's never going to be enough care in this community for the number of people in need. I think we all know that. But there has been a remarkable ability to merge all these resources instead of having them scattered throughout the county. And through that integration, we're getting a lot of synergy. I think we're getting the impact of the synergy of integration that you don't have through independent organizations.
Okay. Value options is a lot better than nothing, but we are still at the real low end of the spectrum here as far as psychiatric care in this state, and you know that as well as I do. I believe by law the state is charged with the responsibility for psychiatric care, and they lateral that to the county. Is that correct?
No, actually, as a result of the Arnold v. Stein lawsuit, which I can actually talk about with some authority since that was one of my major projects many, many years ago, the outcome of that Supreme Court case, which has not yet been dismissed, is that the state would take primary responsibility, and the county would, in lieu of delivering direct service, would, based on a formula, contribute to the pot of money that then also helps match the federal dollar that comes down. We felt that and there was a certain formula for doing that because we cannot control costs since we do not manage the system. Now, I don't want to address how effective the REBA is. I'm not even touching that one. But the primary responsibility and oversight and funding does rest with the state. And then the federal match, of course.
Okay. And so in that county now, through NOVA, is going to pick up a significant amount of this care.
Actually, when the debt on this campus is retired, which we hope will be very soon, actually, the county holds the note for the property right now, in general. Its intent is to convey buildings and the ground under them to the private nonprofits on campus. And the only presence we will have is part of the limited liability corporation which manages it, because we are one of those players on campus. It will not be a county per se project. It truly is an integrated collaborative effort. I think it's probably the only campus of this kind that is governed by a group of providers and not just by one. And the fact that they could form this LLC and get 501c3 status speaks miles about the collaboration that has evolved over the past years. It will not be a county campus. What it will be, as the face slide said, is a gift to the citizens of Maricopa County, and we were proud to play a major role in its development. Then it's going to belong to the community.
One other question, and I'll let someone else have a turn. A significant number of the problems, as we said before, are psychiatric problems. Significant number of those are drug-related. Value Options is very reluctant to take care of drug-related psychiatric problems. You will be taking care of drug-related psychiatric problems?
Community Bridges, which is the drug and alcohol arm for Maricopa County, has a presence in the Day Resource Center, and they are handling that issue both on campus and through referral to other appropriate settings.
Thank you.
Councilmember Souza.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Adding to what Dr. Scott has said about the state's responsibility for caring for the mentally ill, I assume the conversation that both of you have had, that the state is not involved in this program at all?
They have actually do play a very large role. The Department of Housing, for example, has given the campus 2 major grants, one to help with cast construction, one to help with Nova construction to the tune of $1.2 million. They also do contribute to operational funds for some of the providers on campus. In addition, the state legislature just allocated $1 million to homeless issues throughout the state, of which $400,000 is coming back to support this construction project.
Well, in viewing, the campus itself, I want to congratulate you on the progress you've made there. is certainly in an area that demands a need. There's no question about that. So I think it's appropriately situated. I'm concerned, as Dr. Scott is, about the state having responsibility and our legislature not stepping up to meet that necessity. With that, I'll keep quiet.
Councilmember Holland.
Not being that familiar with this population, just kind of curious, how do we have folks in the Goodyear area that may find themselves homeless. Are they moved to the campus, or do they find their own way to the campus? How do we offer them help so we can take advantage of some of the services?
Long term, it's our hope, and it's Mag's hope, that what you see in downtown Phoenix gets replicated even on a small scale as is appropriate elsewhere in the county, at least east and west. But for the time being, we know that those that are long-term chronically homeless, and remember, we are not addressing women and children directly on campus, although we have much contact with them and help them. Many of those do find their way. I can tell you, and you'll probably hear that later this evening, that at the 400-bed emergency shelter that does point-in-time studies, we know that just at that one part of the campus, about 3.8% of the individuals they see report that Goodyear is their point of origin. They're finding their way there. That probably converts to, I'd say, 150 folks and many, many, many bed days. So it's just the same in almost every major city. What's going to make this work and get homelessness a reduced issue in our community, and I just came from a conference from the U.S. Interagency on homelessness, that is we're going to have to make it accessible closer to folks because our valley's so big. And so, as we say in all of our material, this is not meant to be an end in itself. In fact, we hope it's a catalyst and a model for replicating those parts that make sense for other communities, and hope to be able to help other communities further that as we learn more.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lord.
So help me understand this. Are you saying that, say, a family approaches you, a mother and father and children, and they're homeless?
If a family approaches
Can you
us,
just explain how that process goes?
If a homeless family approaches the current campus, and I won't even go into the low demand overflow processes because it takes a little bit off this subject. If they make a contact at the Day Resource Center or any other point, they are separated, isolated, and contacts are made immediately with all those agencies equipped to do family services, children's services, and they get placed. They never go back to the street. They never go back to the street. But you don't want your chronically homeless with that high percentage of folks who have veterans who are struggling with alcohol problems and your mental health problem. We don't want to intermix them residentially at this point in time.
Thank you.
Councilmember Antonia.
I just applaud you for what you're doing and the passion you bring to the cause. I mean, and we're asked with a $6,400 question for the next 3 years, which to me seems like an easy yes. So I thought I'd just vocalize that because I know staff takes our feedback at these work sessions and moves forward with
So
it.
we appreciate, and we cordially invite you anytime to come down and visit. We love to show it off.
We'll be there.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Councilmember Souza.
I would ask the council to seriously consider this request, and perhaps it could be made an annual part for the next 3 years of the community services request that we're going to be discussing later on today. I think it's a terrific program, and the young lady pointed out, 3.8% of our people will utilize these facilities, and $19,000 for 150 recipients of the service is a small cry and a small responsibility for the city to undertake. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Scott.
One other quick question. Since you do have a support from the state, involuntary admissions will go to the state hospital then?
Involuntary admissions will work just the way they always did. If there's a basis for, threat of harm to self or others, it'll go through the same petition process as it does for anybody else in the community.
And where will they go?
They go to the psychiatric recovery centers, and the petition process happens there. They may get court ordered to ASH.
Okay.
They may get court ordered to local mandatory treatment and never even have to go in, or jointly.
Yeah, but assuming they have to be admitted.
It would be the same hospitalization process as we have now.
Thank you. And don't forget to leave your card because you will get some gifts.
I would be delighted, as well some of your other speakers this evening, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you very much. Are we talking about funding from the general fund or community?
This is a capital campaign request.
The 19,000 I'm talking about.
Yes, it's separate from the community funding. It did not come through that process.
So it's going to, right. And did you want it to, I guess?
Well, it's something we consider as one of the avenues, of obtaining the finances to make it possible for the city of Goodyear to participate in this program. As they indicated, the necessity is there, and that we should,
So
address ourselves.
just include it into our next year's list.
Right.
Okay.
Or whatever the council decides at a later date.
Okay. But the 6,000 this year, or is it next year? 0607.
It starts 0607.
Okay. And that'll come out of the general fund. Yeah. Okay. Rob?
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask for clarity here. So we're not going to be discussing it in the community
No.
funding for the next 3 years, because I think just for the security of these folks, I'd rather not be discussing it every year. I'd rather say 3-year commitment out of the capital budget and just make it so.
Okay, so there seems to be a consensus, just take it out of general fund. Is that all right, Dick?
That's our time.
Yes.
Okay, so that's what we'll do,
One way or
Steve.
the other.
That way they're not coming every year and we're not having to deal.
Okay.
There are distinctions. The others are programming, and this is capital campaign.
Right.
Good.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Thank you very much. Next subject is community funding, and this is Jareen and Paul, I think. Is that right?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. What is before you tonight is the result of the work of about 12 hours of debate on just the community funding portion of the requests that have come forward. Paula Lardo will be doing the special events funding right after this, and she'll be talking to you about those committee work. We've had 29 applications. We have a book here for those of you not in the committee if you wanted to look at any of that information. But what was provided you was the summary matrix that gave you what was requested, what cost per resident was offered by the funding that they were requesting, what is the recommended amount. And rather than go through all the different items that were in the COAC, I will say that there was a request for 2 of the entities to come forward tonight to present to you additional information. And Mayor, if it's fine with you, I'm going to go ahead and turn that portion over to those that we asked to come back, the West Valley Fine Arts Council and the Volunteer Center, if they would like to come and answer any questions the council may have on their application.
And then subsequent to that, are we going to get down to the list? And
Yes.
so we can go through the whole list?
You bet.
Or at least ask questions on specific items. Okay.
I'm not sure if Julie Richard is here. I didn't see her in the audience. She was to come tonight for the West Valley Arts Council, so if the Volunteer Center has their person here.
Evening.
Good evening.
Sure.
Do you want me to start talking? Okay. My name is Alexis Walker, and I am the CEO of the Volunteer Center for all of Maricopa County. We served about 53,000 people across the county last year in finding them volunteer opportunities. And there was some confusion around our proposal, and I apologize for that. We started a new program called our Caring Together program. And what it is a sort of a strategic way of getting more people involved in volunteering. And it starts off with the youth piece, and I don't think we made that too clear in our proposal. But we start by focusing on youth, and then we move to retirees. Then we move to people who may have some disabilities. Then we go into the low income, and then into different cultures. But we take it a piece at a time, and we've just started this, so we don't have all the kinks worked out quite yet. But in Goodyear, what we'd like to do, we've been here for a number of years, and we have a number of people from Goodyear who've gotten involved in volunteering, but not necessarily in Goodyear, and that's one of the struggles we've had. Sometimes people prefer to volunteer right after work or during lunch hour or whatever, and they're working over in the big metropolitan city of Phoenix. So one of the reasons we start with youth in this program is because we think that is where our future is, to have youth understand the issues in their community and to try to do something and empower them that they can do something to make a difference. And so we've had some real luck with some of our youth programming, and we've always done it sort of sporadically. And this is the first time in our proposal is for Goodyear to kind of pilot this real focus on getting the youth started. We did start that this year with our Youth Service Day. It was the first time we had a Youth Service Day project here in Goodyear. And our goal is to get at least 100 youth involved in volunteering. We will do that. We have 3 different areas in which we can do that. One is through our Youth Volunteer Corps, which we would establish here. We have one that's valley-wide, but transportation for children 11 through 18 is an issue. And so we want to have sort of a separate Youth Volunteer Corps here. The second is Youth Service Day, expanding those service projects, which basically come out of the Youth Volunteer Corps. And possibly, we're not sure if this is going to work yet, would be to add our Reading Buddies program, where we have youth 11 to 18 teaching kindergarten through 3rd graders how to read. We've also started, it's coming up this summer, we're very excited, we're partnering with the YMCA here, and we are going to be doing one of our summer block projects here, and that's an 8-week block of time where we involve youth in different kinds of services. And we base it across a week. So if we're doing elderly, everything for that week will be focused on the elderly and their issues and how the youth can actually impact that. In fact, I believe one of the projects is they're doing crafts and creative things so that they can then bring them to a nursing home and interact with the elderly that live there. That's an example. The Volunteer Center has committed to this in that we have recently requested a half-time AmeriCorps member who would be the key person that would oversee all of this youth activity, because this is sort of a new focus for us here. And we expect to hear about that in next month. So we should hear if we actually got that. What we did is we usually get one full-time AmeriCorps member, Youth Volunteer Corps, from the National Youth Volunteer Corps of America. And this year we decided we wanted to split them up into 2 part-time so we could do this focus project. Now, probably one of the reasons a lot of this information wasn't in your proposal is because we finally started getting some answers on how things were going to work. The other thing we want to do, and this is kind of new, is we usually charge nonprofits a small fee to be a member, where we would recruit volunteers to help them out. With youth, there are a lot of risk and liability issues around that, and so a lot of nonprofits kind of shy away from involving youth. So what we are going to do this year is any nonprofit that is actually located here in Goodyear is going to be scholarshiped in as a member of the Volunteer Center, so that we can encourage them to connect and let the youth come in and do what they can do. Obviously, they can't do everything. You know, domestic violence shelter is pretty much out. But there are a lot of things like with St. Mary's Food Bank, packing food boxes. They may not be able to drive them and deliver them, but they definitely can help out. So that's another area that we're focusing on, because you can't get people to volunteer unless there's some place for them to volunteer.
Okay.
That's a summary.
Thank you.
Very good.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience here from the West Valley Arts Council on behalf of their executive director? I don't believe she is yet here, and she did know it started at 5, so we can continue on if you'd like.
Okay, we'll do that then. And normally we'd go to the public first, but let's take this list, and we'll be talking all of these at this one time, to include yours.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Has everyone do they have this at their place?
I brought extra copies in case anyone needed one,
If
but
anyone in the public would want one, they don't have one. Okay, what I'd like to do is just start off by having us ask questions concerning the structure and the process itself, okay? And anybody, or if anyone would like to elaborate on that subject. I had two questions for the, and I guess we should announce the members who are on this committee. Doreen, would you do that?
yes, we had Councilmember Dick Sousa, Councilmember Fred Scott, and Councilmember Brenda Holland served this year for us on our subcommittee. And also the staff were Paulo Lardo and Linda Dillard and myself.
Okay, so we had 6 people on the committee.
Yes.
The first question I had, and just to give you an idea about the process we're looking at, the matrix is, would city provide service? And for example, for some of these it says yes. And I would ask you, I guess, under what auspices would we provide that service? What auspices are we required to provide that service? I assume that's what that means.
Yes, Mayor, as we grow as a city, oftentimes those things that are marked yes are what larger cities would provide. One of the reasons we have our community funding is because we as a city don't provide social services per se. We don't have the facilities, the capital funding, we don't have the staffing, and therefore we pay other agencies that do service our residents what would be the equivalent of social services for the community. Therefore, just to take example, like those programs that Avondale does have, they come to us and we give them a percentage of their request every year so that we can support our residents having some of those basic social services that are provided by others.
I guess, let me ask it this way. There's no question that everything on here is as important as our responsibilities are, but our responsibilities are pretty clear. We have policy that dictates what we're responsible for. What policy dictates that we're responsible for these items?
Well, there is a criteria that the council subcommittee adopted several years ago, and so we used that criteria, which was listed in the COAC. Some of it has to do with legal, and I can go down that list if you prefer that we talk about those.
What I'm seeking is, what is the policy that requires us to do these things? Because it says, would city provide service, and it says yes, if it weren't provided by these others. And I don't understand. What policy directs us to do that?
Mayor, I don't believe that it's a policy that we have agreed, that you have agreed to yet. It's just that, as we grow larger, we might consider offering these services and developing divisions within a department possibly to offer these things where we would bring it in-house rather than pay someone on the outside. So I don't believe there is. And Stephen, I'll defer that to you if there's some city policy that I'm not aware of.
Mr. Mayor, Green, I believe the question is there any state law or other requirement that the city would provide any services listed in that clause?
No, there's no legal requirement, as far as I'm aware.
And I think it's important, and what I worry about is, was the committee convinced because of that particular column that in fact the city was otherwise obligated to do these things? And the fact is, the city isn't.
No, I don't think we ever even thought in that.
But that's the way it reads. Would the city provide the service, and says yes for the Avondale Senior Center program if they didn't provide it? And that isn't necessarily true. We aren't obligated to do that. I think that's misleading.
Possibly the word could should be substitute rather than would.
Yeah,
Would
that's
consider
the
or should.
difference.
And if we had the funds, for example, available to even organize these types of groups of people.
That's a good
It has a
question.
responsibility.
But I agree that when you get to a certain population, it becomes,
What is that?
I don't know what the population, but
It isn't 45,000.
at one
And
point, and I think that's.
it's probably different for every one of these things. So the question's a good question, but
Yeah.
there's no mandate requiring us to do these things.
And then in the past, in fact, John Leach is here, he remembers this, we had, in fact, John, you may have thought of this idea, is that every year we would not raise the amount available more than a certain percent.
Yep.
And And that was a policy. And I think it was even written. I'm not sure it was written, but I thought it was a policy. And sometimes we would exceed that. But we always exceeded knowing that we were exceeding, waiving the policy. And I see here some that exceed that by 100% or more, because the percent was a couple percent, wasn't it? Yeah, 2 or 3%. Wouldn't increase it more than that per year. And when we did that, we did it relatively a relatively small level, but beyond the 2 or 3%. Here, no comment is made of that. Was that?
I think that was, I interpreted that as meaning it was a guideline. I don't think it was a policy that said a certain percentage. At least that's the way it was explained to me. These were guidelines to work by.
Mayor, we did live within that guideline this year. In fact, we didn't overall we worked with the same budget amount as last year's, and we didn't use the 3% GDP overall for the program. So we would still be within that guideline for this year.
It was on a per program basis. For example, Campfire goes from 5 to 8,000. Well, that's more than 2 or 3% increase. And there's several of them. And maybe that's smart to do that.
I think the discussion among the committee was that it was an overall percentage and not line by line, because if you notice in the new column, they cannot begin more than $1,500 if it's a first-time request. And the discussion was some of these programs really legitimately should have more money than that in their second and following years. And so that gives the latitude of the committee to make recommendations to you, and it still lives within the guideline of an overall GDP that we follow.
Yeah, and again, that's not really what I'm referring to. I'm talking about, do you remember this, Frank?
Yes.
It was no more than a couple percent per program per year. You could exceed that, but you always had to make mention of that fact, that we started with 2 or 3%, and then if you thought like Campfire needed more than that, you said it. But in fact, it was clear that you understood that was the guideline or policy. And even if it isn't a policy, it was certainly respected among the 7 members of the council that that's what we would do. And I don't see any evidence of that here.
Well, we discussed it.
Yeah. Let me say this, that we had a figure that we were working with.
A total figure.
A total figure that we were working with, okay? And then we had the requests. We measured those requests against the figure that the financial figure we were working with, okay? And it wasn't easy doing this, to consider the amounts that each individual agency was going to get, or what they requested. And it took 2 meetings for us to finalize this.
No, it's a big job.
To adjust, to adjust that figure. And to me, the figure itself is a budgetary item, and that's the figure we work with.
Looking at the overall figure.
The other column that we added in, Mayor, as part of the consideration along with that percentage was the cost per resident or unit and the number of residents benefited. That was all in addition in that discussion as well. So there were several criteria the subcommittee, because there wasn't a written policy from the council that they did discuss, that they could use as part of the evaluation of the criteria.
But I agree, if I may, Mr. Mayor, I agree with your concept of where these type of contributions should go. Maybe we've missed something along the way getting here about what the increases were going to be, what the committee was to work with. If you feel that we should work within a 3% guideline, then I think that should be a matter for council, and that we set that guideline, and so that we'll have direction in the future when it comes to these requests.
Yeah, I just feel like we did set it. We've practiced it for several years. And I'm not going to make a big issue of it here now, but I'm just concerned that we had a guideline or a policy, which in reading this entrance here as to the policies, that was not included as one of the policies. And it certainly was understood by those of us on council that we were going to limit it to that unless there was specific reason not to. And every year there was for a couple.
Sure. Well, as long as you realize that, because if you look at last year's, I was on the committee, we violated it then last year, so.
I know.
But it was a guideline, not a policy.
And
so,
yeah, And we're sure that this committee was aware of that guideline
Yeah.
and took it into consideration on every application.
Right,
Is that true?
and it's true, and when we evaluated them also, the information that was given to us talked about what they did with some of the monies that we gave them last year, and why they were asking for either a little bit more or the same amount, and we took that into consideration as well.
Okay, other questions or comments on the process? Vice Mayor?
I'd like to know why there were considerations for some of these agencies, or what do you want to call them, that received the same amount that they requested when it was way over, like 33 or 133%. When there was another one down here, for instance, Southwest Valley Literacy requested 5,000, and you only recommended 1,650. I mean, what was the rationale used? Theirs was 225% above what was requested the year before.
Well, can I answer that? You're looking at, if you want to dissect every figure that we came up with here, we have a compendium put together with notes in it, and we could certainly reflect back on that. But each and every one of these was considered as a separate entity. And the way we arrived at that is all recorded with regard to note-taking. So if you're asking us for a specific way we adjusted a specific request, I can't tell you that. But I can tell you that if we reflect on it, we could give you an explanation for that if you really want it.
The question I have is, you ask for a committee to be formed. The committee meets, they do the research, they look into each of this, and then all of a sudden they're presenting this, and are we saying now that committee work is not adequate, that we as a council want to be that committee, each and every one of us? That's what I need to ask you, because I'm it's like we ask for a committee to do something, and they do it, and they give us the information, and we say, that's not good, let's go back. So,
Thank you, Georgia.
So if that's what you want to do, then don't ask the committee to do it. Ask the entire council to sit down and meet, and then jointly, we will come up what we want to do.
Yeah.
But I think it's
Your point is well taken. Your point is well taken. And as a matter of fact, we may have some volunteers for next year just from the conversation.
I agree with you, Mayor, on a quota or a percentage. I think that's good business. And then that makes the person applying for that money, the reasons they want to go over that percent, then that gives a concrete goal for them to meet, to say to us and convince us that we need to break that 3% or whatever.
Well,
Frank, he gets to rebut this a little bit. Let's give him a break.
Let me answer.
He wants to say something about what he said. Let's try that first.
I am not arguing against what the committee came up with. I want to know what they used, why some of these were so low, and why some of these others. And it looked like the health thing, anything that had to do with medical or health, pretty much got what they wanted. So I'm concerned about some of this. If this is the case, or how you arrived at this, that's all.
Well, maybe,
I'm not challenging anybody.
Maybe what you're saying then, Frank, maybe I misunderstood you, and that wasn't, I wasn't meaning to jump at you, but maybe what you're saying, no, I wasn't. But maybe what you're saying is that maybe we needed that information in this packet. How did you come to that conclusion? How did you make that decision that you were going to give them? So maybe we need that dialogue that the rest of you had, and then we can look at it and say, yay or nay.
Well, that does exist, does it not, Jerry?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. Councilmember Sousa?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may, you referred to 133%, and that was for Goodyear Alzheimer's. As we all know, I mean, for the first time in a long while, since treatment has been begun with Alzheimer's on a concentrated basis, there's a need for additional funds. And when they came in and asked us for $3,500 versus the $1,500 that they received last year, we felt that the need was there, and we had to meet that need, and that was a good cause.
Mm-hmm. And all they could get last year was the 1,500. But
Right,
anyway,
because of
They were
the
first year last year.
That's right.
first-year guideline.
and you know, and Frank, you said all the health requests, Mountain Park Health Center. You see what they received?
Mountain Park Health Center.
No support.
Well, it must, yeah.
And there was a reason for that, but I don't think we want to go
Yeah.
into those reasons.
And I know what that is, and I'm not questioning that. In fact, I'm not questioning any one of these, except that there is one that I have to request. I have to.
Well,
Yeah.
let's try to stick with process first.
Okay.
As we got away from I tried to emphasize, I had a problem with the process. Were we following the previous direction the councils had followed? And you've answered that question. So, no, was the answer to the question. But any questions more on the process?
Well, I thought we kind of resolved that, Mr. Mayor, by saying that the guidelines have to be established from here on in, and they're firm, and we adhere to those. So,
I don't know if you established it. Do you want that dialogue to be put in our coax the next time on the discussion you had on each of us? Yes or no? Okay.
Thank goodness, because I'm starting to feel like this is an awfully cyclical environment here, because we had this discussion 2 years ago, and that's why we went to the committee process.
Yeah, that's
So if we
right.
start having to go through this, and we don't, exactly what you
That's
said,
right.
we don't trust the committee, I mean, it'd be nice to have a little brief description of the organization and their mission, and that's about it, and then the committee goes through it. I think the whole point of the committee was to get rid of this from each and every one.
And to get rid of having everybody, each organization show up to give a dissertation on this.
Yeah.
and it's important, too, for these organizations to show the impact or what the residents of Goodyear who are taking advantage of these programs are getting out of the program. And that's what I think is tantamount to what our considerations were.
I think that's where we spent most of our time, Dick, was making sure that the money that we gave them last year, if they were not a first time this year,
Exactly.
was how they spent their money and was it used wisely for the Goodyear folks.
Okay, we seem to have talked process. Frank, you wanted to talk about a specific item?
Well, only the fact that we're looking at some of these with, no, I guess I don't.
Okay.
Because I would really not. I'm afraid to open a can of worms that I can't close.
Okay. Other comments or questions from this body here? No. Okay, we had an input from the Volunteer Center, and they asked for $15,000. Last year we gave them $11,500. What's the feeling?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I am still not convinced that this organization is providing services for 700 residents of the city of Goodyear. And frankly, I'm still in a quandary as to what their function actually is. And that's one of the reasons that the Volunteer Center.
Undetermined.
No, okay.
And that was one of the reasons that I was among the council people that asked that they give us something definite of what their function was and how, specifically, how many people actuate that they have served in the city of Goodyear. And I still don't have that fact.
Okay. Other comments?
Something else.
Pardon me?
Something else.
On this subject?
On this subject.
Volunteer
different-
Center.
No, different
Okay.
organization.
Well, we do have to respond to Volunteer Center. The committee decided to leave it up to this group, is that
Right.
correct?
Correct.
Okay, the committee, what would you recommend to this group on that, now that you've heard the input? I heard
Am I
it.
speaking for the committee, or?
No, Dick spoke, but there's two other members.
I would be inclined to leave it just where it was last year and maybe see a more specific request next year, better written.
But Councilman Scott, last year, we had the same questions concerning the 11,500. And we told them at that time that we wanted them to be more specific about what they were doing for residents of Goodyear that were taking advantage of this program.
I agree, that's been a dilemma. I agree.
Yeah, so, And I question that, and that concerns me, because we're talking about, a fair amount of money here. And for, them to come in with a $15,000 request, that's $3,500 over and above what they requested last year, for what?
Councilmember Holland?
I'm serving several organizations here, and so far, we've gone out and gotten all of our own volunteers. I know this organization exists, but since most of these people are in Goodyear, the volunteers, it's easy for them to get here and easy for them to serve these organizations. Several of them are on the youth side. Again, we've gone to the high schools, etc. So,
just a minute, can you clarify, when you say, you're talking about the organizations that you were involved with?
that I'm involved in, that I see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I guess if we were going to do anything, I would recommend that we keep it at last year's number and have them bring back more information for next year's request. I believe they're putting the money to good use. They tried to state that in their paperwork. I just didn't think it was very clear, but I think I understand more now where they're trying to go. I'm willing to support that.
So we have two are indicated support for last year's level for this year.
Correct.
Dick, do you feel comfortable with that?
I'm reluctant to do this, however, to have unanimity amongst the committee members who are deep thinkers, I would go along with it. But with the understanding, okay, that next year, don't come here for your request if you don't have backup. And backup, what I mean by backup, is that we show how many residents of this city are participating in this program and are getting benefit. We're becoming a cash cow here. And I'm getting a little light over here with that.
I can tell. Councilmember Antoniak?
Perturbed at all, are you?
You on this one?
Yeah, I'm on this one. I'd like to reserve the right to take a look at the book, because I obviously I missed reading something and didn't know it was available, but I'd like to read exactly what the Volunteer Center put in there. I mean, I think that's the point of the committee, is to go through and look, and you've come up with an undetermined, which means you're kicking it to the seven of us, which to me says, all I've got is one line: to be determined, Volunteer Center, 15,000.
Well, you did have a briefing, by the way.
Right, but it didn't. I want to see the writing, and I want to see what was presented and compare it and contrast it to last year's, because for the exact reasons that we've discussed, we did have the same conversation about the specific one last year. So,
can you imagine yourself
saying no,
voting for something less than $11.50? Is it $10.50?
Without seeing their application this year, I can't answer that honestly. I think it's unfair to answer that honestly.
I have the same problem. I've been a volunteer for 30-some years, and you did that for your will, and there wasn't any finances connected with the programs. And so I too have a hard understanding as to why we give this. I mean, what are we giving it for? The transportation it takes for them to get to the place?
Administration or...
Organizing the program is really it.
Well, by the time this comes to vote, which I believe will be when's this coming next week on the agenda?
It'll be back in June.
In June?
So we can...
Okay, so you'll have plenty of time to review what,
And I need to do that.
what our ideas were about
Okay.
what was the pros and cons of any grouping that we have to consider.
Yeah, if staff can put that copy together of, without having to recreate that whole binder, just take out that specific one and photocopy it for all of us and throw it in our box,
Especially
that'd be
since
great.
that was the two you were undetermined.
Right.
You could not make that decision on. I think I'll get in on that one, since you couldn't make a decision on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I support the last year's total for this coming year myself. Okay, so at least four of us, 4.5.
Don't take that sitting down, Dick.
Okay, Ms. Richards is here on the West Valley Arts Youth Program.
City manager at some...
Mr. Mayor, before that presentation, I was able to go back into the file, and this is from July 23rd, 2001, which was attached to a June 13th, 2005 council action from a January 10th, 2005. And this is, I believe, pertinent to your earlier conversation about guidelines for allotting community service support funding. Some of the guidelines that the mayor and council have used in the past to establish criteria for funding or allocating the community service funding are as follows. One, the community service support funding revenues are generally increased or decreased annually by the percentage of increase in the retail sales tax. If an organization's request for funding increase over the previous year's allocation, the percent of growth used in the formula for establishing the fund budget would be used. If the increase was 21%, that would be the maximum increase that the organization could get, match percent to percent. To establish credibility and demonstrate the need and ability, first-time requests will be funded up to $1,500 for the first year. The reason I bring it up is your discussion has been about guidelines, policy. It is a policy statement with guidelines attached to it, and I think that each of you may want to have a copy of this, and I think this is the kind of material that, like in the past, this past year, and I think the reference was that there was a GDP, a gross domestic product increase of 2.45%. The request was X, the team recommended something else, and you ended up deciding what you guys wanted to have as the amount to allocate to each of the projects. So these are the parameters, and I think maybe this will be available for guidance, I think, for your final decisions in June. But I think it does reinforce what Jareen was sharing with me is what the subcommittee was using from a different set of information, but it's based upon the policy statements and the guidelines.
It's guidelines.
Well, it's a policy statement that sets up guidelines.
Okay.
Okay?
So the figure that the committee was given, that we had to work with, was last year's figure, plus whatever the GDP.
No, it was last year's figure without an increase. You could have chosen to add a GDP on top of it, which would have allowed you to fund all your projects fully. Mm-hmm. According to the finance director.
Yeah. Okay.
All righty.
I hope that helps and doesn't confuse the issue. But
No, but it would have been nice if we knew it.
Yeah.
yeah.
They didn't have that information.
I don't think so.
No. Thanks.
Yes.
I'd like to clarify that increase would have been enough to fund the $3,500 difference referred to in the COAC, not necessarily everything requested of the committee.
Oh, yeah.
Just
Yeah,
for
we were
clarification.
We know. Yeah.
Okay. Julie?
I brought a presentation on this, but I also brought hard copies. What would you prefer?
You got 3 minutes. You tell us how you want to do it.
I'll just,
This is just on Gallery 37.
no, this is all the answers to the questions that I was given
I think she might be
following the committee meeting. They had specific questions about things, and so I tried to answer them as best as I could. Flipping to on the first page, you wanted to know approximately how many Goodyear residents are served by everything that we do, and so I broke it down. For the Arts Advantage program, which is when we bus students into Millennium High School for performances, we do 8 performances this year. That's up from 4 last year. Approximately 43% of all the students who attend those performances are Goodyear residents, and that's 375 students. The next block is Kid Tix. Kid Tix are free tickets that we give to students who request it and have some sort of a need. They would not otherwise be able to attend a performance if they didn't have this opportunity.
Essentially, we have a fund that we have set aside to provide those tickets on an annual basis, and 56% of all the tickets that we gave away this year were to Goodyear residents, and that was 74. The next block is Gallery 37, and this year we've hired the class for this year. We have 19 students. We had 18 students last year. We want to keep the classes small. We've decided that quality rather than quantity is a much better thing for this project, and it worked out beautifully last year with the students. We required them to provide portfolios, which is again the case this year. And this year we have 7 Goodyear residents, and again that's 36% of all of the students who are participating in Gallery 37 are from the city of Goodyear. Every year we have more students from Goodyear than any other city. I think the highest number that we've had from the city of Goodyear in the past has been 15 or 16 students in 1 year. So that's that. You asked about the cost per student. The next block gives us that, and that it's $3,200 is our cost to provide this program for these students. But they get 4 credits from EMCC. They get wonderful training. Many students come back summer after summer. They are paid, so they don't have to work at Sonic or Starbucks or wherever. They get to actually do something in the field that they quite often pursue as a profession. A lot of these students we end up giving scholarships to, and they go off to college in visual art or graphic design or something like that.
That $3,200 includes their wage?
It includes their wage, and it includes all of the expenses of the project, essentially. The next program under our Arts Education program is our Arts Education Partnership, and our Arts Education Partnership was started actually about a year and a half ago, about 6 months after I got here. And what we did was we had 3 original schools in this partnership. They were Agua Fria, Liberty, and Litchfield. And it was started on through funding from the Arizona Community Foundation to conduct a community audit of arts education programs in those school districts. And what typically happened in phase 2 of those programs is that the Arts Council and the school districts would get together and decide on some kind of a project or an after-school program or hiring a district arts coordinator. Well, we had kind of a little different situation with the 3 original districts. We brought them together, and something that I had done in South Carolina, and that is very popular throughout the state of South Carolina, and the state actually funds this, is, and Los Angeles County is doing the same thing. Actually, this is kind of spreading across the country, but they're investing in creating arts education policies and plans for these districts rather than giving them money specifically for one-time after-school program that would go away after that money is gone. So this was our way of creating something that would be lasting, that would create infrastructure, that would strengthen their arts education programs as a whole. And so we brought the superintendents of the 3 school districts together, and they wanted to add Avondale because Avondale and Litchfield feed into Agua Fria. So we added Avondale into it. All 4 of these districts serve the city of Goodyear, every single one of them. The next page shows the total number of students served by this project. This past year, we created those plans, and I believe they've all, at this point, been passed or approved by the school districts that we're working with. We've hired a part-time multi-district arts director that we're actually splitting his time between being our events person and this to help implement those plans, and we're just starting that at this point in time. But essentially, 10,961, and this is kind of a rough guess, but 10,961 of the 21,500 students in those 4 districts are from the city of Goodyear. And then the arts camps, approximately 150 students are served by that are City of Goodyear residents, and then our artist residencies that we're projecting for next year, that's kind of a new program. We're projecting that 830 City of Goodyear kids will benefit from those projects. The other thing that came up when I was here last time, and this kind of ties in, but all of our performances, our performing arts series and our events, I had my staff go back and look at exactly how many City of Goodyear residents attend our events. And as you can see, 56% of the people who attend our events are City of Goodyear residents, which is pretty amazing, considering they're all over the place. And that translates in raw numbers, and this is including the Symphony and the Native Festival. And these are a little low because it's just pre-sale tickets that we've got the numbers on, not the ones that are paid at the door. But that translates to about 6,000 tickets that we sell to City of Goodyear residents over the course of a year. The next page are income sources. One of the questions was, where do we get our income from? And as you can see from this, about 3%, and I added everything with the exception of the capital campaign money that we got from the City of Goodyear last year in this chart. And about 3% of our total funding comes from the City of Goodyear, 15% from grants and other government donations. The big red space, 44%, that is from individual donations and corporate sponsorships and any kind of foundation grants and that type of thing. 25% of our income comes from admissions, ticket sales, fees, and then 13% comes from interest income and concessions and those kinds of other income sources. You asked about the West Valley Center for the Arts and the breakdown of the city funding, and so I put that on this page for you, and also indicated population, so you could kind of figure that for yourself by population if you wanted to do it that way. Right now, the City of Avondale has put in their budget $550,000 for the center. The City of Goodyear has $250,000, and just to correct that, the City of Avondale has voted to, well, they put in their budget accelerating the funding, the original funding, and then adding an extra $150,000 this year, and then they would add the second $150,000 for a total additional $300,000 to their original $250,000 pledge that would go in next year's budget. Litchfield Park has pledged $50,000 and Tolleson has pledged $25,000. Those are the cities who have agreed to fund the center. And then again on the last page, this is the breakdown of the money that we're looking at right now. EMCC has got $8.4 million in revenue bond funds, and our $2.9 million in public and private donations would make $11.3 million. So I hope I answered all of your questions. If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to give it a shot.
Does the 2.9 include the property? Is that what?
No, it doesn't. That is just cash and pledges. The property is probably another 1.5, figuring.
Okay, but we're on the West Valley Arts Youth Educational Programs, Gallery 37, right this minute, correct? Mm-hmm. Which is part of what you briefed us on. You asked for $25,000. Last year you got $20,000. Comments on that specific subject, youth, arts, and 37.
Yeah. Yes, if I may, Mayor, and Judy, thank you very much for explaining how this is laid out, because it's one of the things I requested. I wanted to know where the population breakdown was. The Gallery 37, I've always been in support of that. I think it's one of the very important things for for our youth here in Goodyear, and those people do gain an awful lot from that. And $25,000 is pretty inexpensive for what those students gain in the end, what they get when they finish those programs. And if they keep coming back, you know that it must be worthwhile. Mm-hmm. So I certainly support you on that 100%.
Okay, Councilmember Scott?
I have nothing else to add except other communities not in the immediate area sending students to that program, the youth program. For example, Peoria, do they send any?
Yeah, they had 3 this year.
Any other communities outside of that?
Yes, they're in here. Let's see. We've got Avondale, Tolleson, Litchfield, Buckeye, Levine, Phoenix, and Cashin. Mm-hmm. And every year the mix changes a little.
I have no other questions. Julie answered all of our questions that we've had.
Councilmember Holland?
Well, I think I was impressed with how many Goodyear residents.
I was amazed myself when we started adding the numbers up.
Because I was really concerned about that. From the youth point of view, I'm glad to see that we captured their attention and they still want to come back and do this type of thing. I would definitely support the request that you put in.
Councilmember Holland? And then Laura?
Lord, yeah.
Other book
You're
end.
blonde. No, it's all right. I too support the Gallery 37. I went to a couple of the exhibits that they did, and I talked to several of the students and the mothers, the fathers, and so I got the other side of the benefit that happens to the family. It becomes a family affair.
Definitely.
And so, yes, I support this. And just let me say thank you. Because, you know, sometimes when people make presentations to us, they just assume we know all of this. And you know what? I don't. And so this is if these had been answered at the beginning, then you wouldn't have had to come back again. So just let this be a lesson to other people that are coming before us. You know, present the information, because that's how we make the best decisions.
We'll put it in the application next year.
That's right. Thank you very much.
Attachments are welcome.
Councilmember Antonio?
I think everybody probably knows where I stand, but I would support the full request and express that to the dozen or so constituents that emailed me, and many of us, actually. But, you know, just to quick point this out, about every fourth or fifth year, I think, we'll probably end up with a project in the city. And an artist to do a public art project, typically, I mean, $100,000 is probably a good average. And so to me, $25,000 a year over the process of 4 years is a good investment for us. It's a good investment for the youth in our community. Just sending 10 students through this every year would be $32,000 just based on the cost per student, which means we're saving $7,000 by not providing this program within our city walls and by not employing an artist to train these students and all the other things that are above. So I think there's a net benefit, a plus kind of benefit here for this investment. It keeps some kids active during the summer, and we get a tangible result at the end of the summer, and they get a tangible result at the end of the summer. So,
Councilmember Souza?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I see a tremendous value in Gallery 37, because that's my pride and joy. All we have to do is look around at our parks and see the artwork that this group has contributed. Not only there, but at Lipscomb as well. And just on that principle alone, I would support the request that you made for $25,000 as a member of the committee.
Okay, yes, sir.
Julie, subject to transportation, this program has come up in the past. Have you done anything about that? Because there are a lot of children in the past that would be very interested in this, but no way of getting here. Have we done anything to correct that?
There's really nothing we can do about that at this point. We had one student actually who applied for a scholarship from us, and we saw her portfolio from the scholarship and said, "How come you're not in Gallery 37?" She said, "Well, I really don't drive very well." And so her mother was working with her, and I think they were going to practice with getting her to EMCC. She has a car. I think, you know, kids just have certain limit. When you have such a huge, you know, square mileage that we're covering with this project, it's, you know, we have to really rely on them.
This is the fifth year for this? How many years?
This is the seventh year.
7 years? And it's been a problem from the beginning, so it's something you might want to look at.
do we ask the other parents of the applicants whether they'd be willing to carpool or not?
You know what, we are looking at multiplying these projects. So we're trying to get one in the city of Surprise next year. We're trying to get them in other cities so that kids do not have to travel as far. So that's one of the things that we are trying to do to solve that.
Okay, Larry Lang, sounds like there's obviously support here for $25,000 for West Valley Arts. That means we're $3,500 over, is that correct? Or assuming we did the entire $15,000 for Volunteer Center, if we do the 11.5, we're about even. Is that a correct statement? Okay, and there seemed to be support for more than a majority here. 11.5. I mean 1150. 1100. What is it? 11,500. Yeah. So if we did that, and I know you still want to, both of you want to read it. You're welcome to do that. But if we did that, we'd be on balance. Is that correct?
Yep.
Is that okay with everybody?
Yes.
Okay. It's open to the public for any comments, disagreements. Good. Thank you. Okay, we'll move to events, right? Yes. Yes.
Hear all that.
What did Gary ask? I'm sorry.
There's budget on the agenda.
Oh, yeah, that's, yeah.
We'll take a break before that. Let more people file on it. Before you start, we're short here. How much? Was it?
Sorry,
What was the shortage here?
at 8,100,
How much?
at 8,100 in total.
Okay. For event? For both, or Larry?
In total. This is just for events.
8,100 is, we're short.
Here, Council. I really want to thank the subcommittee for their work in working on special events. Now, this is different, and the criteria are different than what we do for community funding. That's why we separated this out about 3 years ago, because the way you look at special sponsorship is totally different than how you're looking at funding human resource, I think, assistance. The first is, we'll go over the goals. The key goals we've looked at for sponsorships are, and that the subcommittee talked about, is the preference that it be held in our city. Not all of them are, but the preference is that it be held in ours for us to sponsor. That it have a high attendance from the city of Goodyear. That it fill a void, maybe that our Goodyear Recreation Department or division might put on one of these events, but just the same as Vincent said, we're a smaller city, we don't have the staff yet, and maybe at some point it is the type of thing that cities just put on, we might want to put on. Does it enhance Goodyear's image? Does it build awareness for our city? And does it heighten the cultural or educational aspects of a community? And when I basically put these together, I did it from the standpoint of when going out selling events to clients, to private sector clients. These are all the things that they asked for and they wanted when we brought an event to them. So the other is, does it have a growing audience? I mean, is it something that's getting better every year? Is it getting better in quality? Or is it versus a stagnating event, so to speak? You sort of have to take a look at events year after year and see if they really are good and they're really changing and always getting better and attracting people, or sometimes do they live their lifespan or their life cycle, and is it time for them to go away? Does it bring people and dollars into our community? And we like to look at the entry fee and say, is it reasonable for the event? Some charge, some don't charge, but some of those that do charge, is it reasonable for what they're getting? One of the big ones is our name in the title, or is it under as a presenter? And I'll tell you the big difference in that. If your name is on the title, and it says the Goodyear Rodeo, it will always be referred to as the Goodyear Rodeo. If it's the rodeo presented by the City of Goodyear or hosted by the City of Goodyear, the majority of the time in all advertising, you'll never hear the word Goodyear mentioned. It will be, say, in your print ads in the newspaper maybe, but not in editorial that you're getting or, say, on TV or any of those advertising places. So on the sheet that you have, we basically went over and rated all of these from a standpoint, there was a total of 200 points, and things like if it was in the city, they would get 30. Versus if it wasn't in the city, we just gave minus 30 because it wasn't in the city. And high attendance from the Goodyear was a plus or minus 20, fills a void, plus or minus 20, enhances Goodyear's image, plus or minus 20, builds awareness of the city, plus or minus 10, cultural or educational benefit, plus or minus 20, a growing audience, plus or minus 10, quality improves each year, plus or minus 10, brings dollars into the city, plus or minus 20, cost to the public, there it varied. If it was free, we gave it a plus 10 points. If it was under 10, it was just rated at 0. $11 to $20 entrance was a minus 10. 21 to 30, minus 20. 31 to 40, minus 30. Basically, the more expensive it got for people to get in, the less points it got for us as a city to sponsor. Do we have our name on the event? Then it became a plus 40. If it was under The event, we gave it 20, and total score, possible highest, could be 200. Now, as we went through these, we had 13 requests this year. 6 we had sponsored in the past, 7 were new that had never asked for sponsorship before. 6 of the 13 events were being held in Goodyear, and based upon the subcommittee's meetings, 8 were being recommended for funding by the subcommittee. Now, to go over those, I hope you can see these. I had to get pretty small to get them on. The first page is just those recommended for funding. The symphony had a score of
We don't have this particular, right?
Oh, I'm sorry.
we do.
Do we?
No,
Okay,
you-
I'm just trying to keep up
Actually, you
here.
don't. You
No,
don't
we
have
have
those.
we don't have the slides.
You don't have
I
the
just- I was
slides,
looking
right.
for it.
The symphony rated 120, and yes, it's in Goodyear. They asked for 25,000. The numbers are on your sheet. They asked for 25,000, and asked for in-kind to 7.5. Last year, they got 15,000 and 7.5, and the recommendation this year was to stay with the 15 and the 7.5 in-kind. The symphony has not grown. It stays the same. It really can't house a lot more people. The quality, of course, sometimes it's better, sometimes it's the same, but it's obviously a quality event, really brings culture and education to our community, which is one of the reasons it rated very, very high. A new one this year, which is coming through the West Valley Arts Council as well, is the Ballet Arizona, which is a brand-new event. That's why it's in green up there. Its score was 150. One of the reasons it scored higher was because it's free to the public. The symphony, you have to pay to get in, so that sort of gives it a discount. But the ballet is going to be free to the public. Yes, it's in Goodyear. It will be done very much the same as the symphony's done and be held in the same place. They asked for 10,000 cash and 7.5 in-kind because they'll need the same amount of barricades, police, fire as the symphony event, because they expect about the same amount of people, about 3,000. So the recommendation of the committee on this one was to do the full funding of 10,000 and 7.5 because it would probably really attract the youth in our city.
The location of the ballet?
Lakeside.
Oh, it is
Lakeside.
Oh, okay.
The Performing Arts Series, it scored 125. Half of the events are in Goodyear, and as Julie said, about 56% of the audience is from the city of Goodyear. They asked for 25,000 cash this year. There's no in-kind because it's not held on city facilities, or they don't need city people to help. So last year we funded it at 15,000, and the recommendation was to fund it at 15,000 again, because it was basically the same number of events being put on, and so we didn't see a reason to increase the amount of money. The rodeo, the score came to 120. Yes, it's in Goodyear. They asked for their usual 10,000 in cash and 3,000 in kind, and because it's not exactly cultural, but it's sort of heritage and educational, and so the audience there also has a problem growing because the rodeo arena is small and can only hold so many. So some of these facts keep the numbers from going up, but it does bring money into the city because everybody who participates is from out of town. So the committee's recommendation was to fund that as the full request as well. Tres Rios scored an 80. This may seem odd because it's an event that we like a lot, but one of the problems is that Tres Rios is moving out of Goodyear, so that gave it a minus 30 right there. It's going into Avondale right at PIR where the river meets the road, the river meets the road. And the problem was they had a really poor relationship with the park. It had a lot of problems. The park will no longer allow it to have people come in free. They said this was the only year they allowed it. They said that from now on it's going to be $5 per car. The grounds were not very good. There is a problem. They really want to celebrate water in this festival, and they can't get to the water from the park. And so this, if they do it where they want to do it in Avondale, they will be doing it right next to the water. So it will be much more accessible, and they feel the children will have a much greater experience with the water. Since it does, they asked for $10,000, which they got, which were funded last year, and zero in kind. The recommendation of the committee, even though they're moving it, was still to give them the $10,000, because the whole purpose of it is to celebrate the river. And in a sense, it's a good place to promote the El Rio project. And we all talked and said someday we hope to move it back when we really have no Rio project, and we would like to ask them to move it back and call it El Rio and really be an event that promotes the El Rio project that we're doing. But it still will be promoting the El Rio project for sure. Fiestas Patrias, the score was 50. It is not in Goodyear. One of the things, because it's not in Goodyear, it's hard to score high on enhances Goodyear's image or builds awareness of Goodyear. What we see this doing, though, it has a pretty high attendance from the city of Goodyear, and is fulfilling a festival that maybe someday our own city would put on. And in a sense, now we're doing it together with a nonprofit, the Hispanic Leadership of Southwest Historic Cultural Association. We're upping it. Last year they only asked for 2,000 and 2,000. This year they asked for 5, and because of the amount of people that they service, and they expect about 10,000, it was a low cost per person. As you see on your sheet, that's like 50 cents per person. So that's really a good cost of putting on a festival. So the subcommittee recommended funding in full, 5,000 and 2,000 in kind. The Relay for Life came up with a score of 90. It is in Goodyear. It's in our city park. They asked for 5,000 in funding, which is up from last year when it was 3,000, and 500 in kind. A lot of people attended this last year, and they felt it was a very good event for our city. It got a lot of awareness, and felt it was very good for the image of the city, and raised a lot of money for charity. That subtotal you see is 70,000 cash and 20.5 in kind. I put the budget down below. It's 55,000 is in the budget right now, and 24,000 in kind. Those are two separate line items. That's why they're separated. But so the subcommittee asked if we could if possibly the city manager in the next budget go round could possibly come up with the 15,000, and I think Larry has that in the next budget. Okay, now, next one is the balloon and air show, which is totally different than the type of things that usually come through on this funding. That's why I put it separate on this line. The score is 170 because of the amount of people it brings, expected to bring about 50,000. It brings a lot of money into the city for a lot of the people who are coming from out of town. It will build awareness of our city. It will definitely enhance our image and has a growing audience. They originally came in asking for about 94,000 in cash, and the in-kind services they asked for amounted to 69.5. The initial response was that we would only give them 55,000 because one of the things, for instance, they asked for in the beginning was the jet fuel, which was like 28,000. We said, we're not going to pay for your jet fuel. So at that point, we did a recommendation of 55,000. Because this is so large, it went in as a supplemental into the budget, a process. And so what was put in, that's the amount that was put in as a supplemental. So if you add all of it together, what was in the basic budget and what went in as a supplemental, the total budget is 113.4 cash and 93.5 in kind. And the total request is 125 plus 90. If you add the two together, what's in total and what's in the budget, and it's about an $8,100 difference for cash and in kind total.
Strictly in the balloon, strictly to do with the balloon, not the other ones?
No, the increase really comes mostly from the 70,000 versus 55 for the smaller events that was asked for and that was approved by the subcommittee. They couldn't cut it down. They didn't feel that they could cut the request down to the 55 that was in the budget at the time. Okay. Any questions before I leave this chart? We're going to go over the balloon race in great detail after this, just so you know, since it's such a large request. These are the special events that came through that basically we did not recommend, that the subcommittee did not recommend funding for. One is the Golf Extravaganza, which is put on by the Hispanic Leadership. And basically this was to buy sponsor a golf hole. Technically, we decided this is not the type of thing that really should be coming through as a sponsorship from that standpoint. It's not, none of these events happen to be in Goodyear. They're not attended by a lot of people. There's like 150 in this case. And the question, they didn't know how many people would be from Goodyear. So the $1,000 to sponsor a hole, we just didn't think was the type of thing we were talking about as sponsorship. The next is I don't know how to say that, Éxito, which is Hispanic Leadership, and that is a dance. And the cost of $1.5K is to sponsor a table. And the dance does raise sponsorships for children, but this one and the next one, the Freedom Dance, which is basically a socializing event for Korean veterans. There are a lot of dances put on in our city which raise money for charity, and if we want to get into funding those, I think it's a whole nother criteria than what we look for sponsoring events that attract a lot of people. Now, the next two are events that attract a lot of people. One is Fiesta Avondale, which is the one that Fiesta Patrias does is in May, and it's more like Cinco de Mayo. The Fiesta Avondale is in the fall, and that celebrates Mexican Independence Day. We said no to this one. It is a festival that the city of Avondale puts on, just like we put on events. And the next one, the Pet Expo, also is an event that the city of Avondale is putting on. And so we just didn't see why they were asking us for, we don't ask them to help sponsor events we put on, and so we just didn't think it was appropriate to help sponsor their events. And that would have been a total of $8,500 that was asked for that we didn't fund. So that's basically it for the event sponsorships. I know the balloon race is the next presentation, since you haven't learned about the balloon race yet. So if you have any questions about any of these besides the balloon race.
Any questions on anything besides? So there's support for the recommendations?
Okay.
Changing gears, Barney, would you like to come up? This is Barney Helmick, who's the airport manager, and he'll be giving a little piece of this presentation. And also we have the people who are the owners of the event here, and I'll be introducing them as we go through. So first I want to start out with the fact that this is the Goodyear Thunderbird Balloon and Air Spectacular, which has been proposed to come to Goodyear. It was held in Glendale the past 2 years, and prior to that it was in the city of Scottsdale for a number of years. Prior to that, for 22 years, it was in the city of Glendale, and was started by the Thunderbird Graduate School as a way to raise money for their student scholarships. That's why it's a 32-year event. And this year, one of the things that makes it very unique is that it's going to feature the Navy Blue Angels in a jet demonstration. Now, we have the Thunderbirds here a lot in the Valley. We don't have the Navy Blue Angels here a lot in the Valley, and they do draw a big crowd. And one of the key things is that it's the 60th anniversary, and they're coming home. They were founded here, which we thought was a pretty unique thing, that they were founded at our Naval Air Base. What is it? It consists of morning hot air balloon launches, evening balloon glows. It has an air show with the Navy Blue Angels, and it has the World War II warbirds and vintage aircraft demonstrations. It also has a huge static display on the ground. It would be Friday through Sunday, October 20th, 21st, and 22nd at the Phoenix Goodyear Airport. We asked why would we want to have this kind of festival in our city. One of the reasons would be to bring this signature event to our city, to draw the estimated 50,000 patrons from all over Arizona and other states, to bring the estimated 15 million in, it's 10 to 15 million in economic impact to the city. 15 million was probably the high. 10 million, I think, is probably a more realistic number. To increase the awareness of Goodyear in the Valley, to showcase Goodyear's growth, to celebrate the 60 years of the Blue Angels, and to celebrate their coming home, since they're coming back here after 60 years.
While you're on that slide, how do you corroborate the 10 or how do you estimate the 10 to 15 million dollar impact?
We're going to get to that, and I'll let
Okay.
Tim Owens speak to that. Good straight man for him.
Okay.
This is a three-way partnership, public and private partnership. Goodyear as a sponsor in the host city, Phoenix Goodyear Airport as the host site, and the private sector event ownership team. I want to introduce the people because if you're very much this event is the people that are running it as to the success of an event. There are three partners that make up Thunderbird Balloon and Air Classic LLC. The first one, if you just stand as I read your name, Neil Borgness. Okay, Neil would produce and recruit the events for the air show. Neil's a 29-year pilot. He's produced and worked Luke Air Force Base shows, Davis Monson Air shows, Cannon Air Base Air shows, and the USAF Ball. He's also founder of the new International Fighter Pilots Association. As a part of that, he has toured England, France, Belgium, Luxembourg, Germany, Japan, China, and Singapore as a guest of the RAF British Pilots Association. He's also published worldwide to 44 million subscribers as an aviation historian. He's an honorary commander of the 56th Fighter Wing at Luke since 2000. Next is Tim Owens. Tim is in charge of all the marketing and sales. Tim has been in the promotion business, event promotion business forever. I knew of him very much when I was in Glendale. For about 20 years, he's run Event Promotions USA and is the founder and CEO. He's dealt with a lot of municipalities, corporations, and event organizers. Basically, he was hired to do the Thunderbird Balloon and Air Classic by Scottsdale and Glendale for a few years, and then got into the buying of the event. He also helped promote the Rock and Roll Marathon in 2004 and 5, and such things as the Tempe Town Lake Festival when it first opened in 2000. Also worked on the Super Bowl as one of the food and beverage concession management and fundraisers for the Super Bowl 30 Street Spectacular, which was quite an event if you all were there. Next is Tom Tygett. Tom will do all of the operations, the logistics, hiring of the vendors, recruiting the vendors, the parking. And all this is a very big job. He's directed a lot of different types of productions. He's currently, from 97 to present, has been with select artists and worked to get top entertainment for the 10 Winston Cup NASCAR races, 3 Major League Baseball venues, the Super Bowl 31 in San Diego pregame. Also works with Chase Ballpark from booking, managing, and producing all non-baseball events. Did the All Warbird reunion in Scottsdale Air Show, and also the Cox Communications Spectacular Air Show, as well as worked on food, was the director of food and beverage for the Super Bowl Spectacular. So as you can see, we have people with a lot of experience, and I can tell you from running events, that's critically important, especially to an event of this size. And a person that really is key to this whole thing is our airport and Barney Helmick. Without our airport, we couldn't have this event. So they have to be comfortable, and they have to be a total partner with us in the event. So I'm going to turn it over to Barney now to talk about what he had to look at before considering having this event at his airport.
Mayor, Council, I'd like to thank you for his time this evening. When I was approached initially for staging this event, the first thing I did was contact the managers at Glendale, Scottsdale, and Williams Gateway Airport who have dealt with this group in the past and asked for their input. I received very positive feedback from each of these individuals saying that they were very professional in staging this event. This was very important to us. We have an image to maintain for both communities and wanted to make sure that they were capable of doing this. A second point of concern for us was the safety and security of the public attending this event. the performers that will be performing in this event, and the airport assets. I've met with Tom and Neil on numerous occasions to have them answer our concerns and have felt very comfortable with the responses they've given to me. At my request, I've also asked them to meet with the tenants and the stakeholders at the airport. We've had several meetings where they have open forum to ask any questions. We've had an extreme buy-in by the tenants. Many tenants, such as Civil Air Patrol, requested to be part of this event. And we also have complete buy-in by the student bases there at the airport. And last but not least, the airport tower manager and myself have met numerous occasions with the FAA concerning air traffic conditions in the area. An event such as this impacts not only our community, but in the entire metropolitan Phoenix area because of airspace issues that are involved. Neil and Tom have provided all the information that the FAA has requested of them to make sure that this event would not interfere with day-to-day operations of other airspace in the community. Last but not least, I would like to say that the City of Phoenix Aviation Department management team is looking forward to working with the City of Goodyear to provide the facilities to assist with this procedure. Any questions?
Barney? Sure. Yeah. Have you contacted Luke Air Force Base with their flight patterns? I know they're down on Saturdays and Sundays, but I understand the Air National Guard does practice landings and
yes.
Such.
Yes. I work regularly with Luke Radar Approach Control, which is their control outside of the base itself. And they are going to have what they call a special events coordination for this event, where they will be shutting down their operations for a period like this. We often do things like this, for example, on PIR weekends where we have extensive traffic in here. And we work all the way through Washington, D.C. to set up special directions for pilots flying in and out of our community during those events.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let me just, are you finished yet? You got more, Paula? Or?
I was just going to say the same as for Sky Harbor traffic as well.
Regarding your briefing, though, are you?
No,
You're not finished?
There's more.
Okay.
Oh, you're finished.
Thank you, Barney.
Thank you. Thank you, Barney.
Thank you. When the proposal first came to Goodyear and came in through this committee process, they originally, I said, asked for $94,000 and then came in at $55,000, and they expect to have a crowd of 50. Now, since we met with the subcommittee, there has been a possible change. There's been a change. SRP was their title sponsor when they first approached the city. They were the title sponsor last year. When they moved it to Goodyear, SRP then decided they didn't want to do it because we're not in their territory. So they dropped out. So they're now looking for a title sponsor, and we asked what would it take for us to be the title sponsor and to put our name on the event. As you've seen on all these slides, it said the Goodyear Thunderbird Balloon Race. That's not what it would say if we're not the title sponsor. It would be the Thunderbird Balloon and Air Show presented or hosted by the City of Goodyear. So to be the title sponsor, it would cost about $50,000 more than what we in cash than what we budgeted right now, just to let you know that. So that's something that we will be looking for direction when we leave this workshop to see if you want us to pursue the title sponsorship or not. Now I'll turn it over to both Tim and Neil to just do a real brief presentation of what this is and answer your question, for instance. Rob?
When is Oktoberfest?
The weekend after.
Okay.
It's usually, I was going to say, it's usually front end of October, last week of September.
Mayor and Council, thank you for having us this evening. So I'm thrilled to be here, actually. I guess I'm going to try to get through this as fast as I can, and if you have questions, please holler. Spaceport. As you can see from the slide, the morning launches are each morning, Saturday and Sunday. We open the gates at 6 a.m., 6:45 launch. We try to delay the launch as long as we can so that we can get more people to see the launch.
it's when you're trying to gather up 4 kids and a mom and a dad and get them all to the airport at 6 a.m. on Saturday morning, you know how that works. So we actually started launching officially at 6:45, but usually it's around 7:15, and it goes for about an hour to an hour and a half. By 9 o'clock, we're pretty well finished with that. And then we start in with our entertainment. We have a USO show in between the end of the launch and start of the air show, which is about 10:30 or 11 o'clock. So Saturday and Sunday mornings, we'll be launching. The folks go out on the field. They stand right up personal and close to the balloons, take pictures, talk to the pilots. It's really a neat thing. And I don't know, how many of you guys have ever been to a Balloon Classic before? I mean, so you guys have a pretty good idea. Yeah. It's fantastic. Kodak probably makes them a fortune, I guess. But so we moved from there into the air show. In the evenings, we have the Friday and Saturday evening glows, the balloon glows, which are now starting to become more popular than actually the launches. I don't know if it has anything to do with 6 a.m. or not, but anyway, we do the, as you can see, the launches. We usually will have anywhere from 60 to 80 balloons. There will be sports balloons, as you can see here, a couple of special shapes and commercial balloons that comprise the field. Most people don't know the difference till they're looking at 40 balloons or 100. So our goal is not to become the Albuquerque Fiesta and have 900, but we want to have quality balloons. We want people that come. The pilots are fantastic. They love the public. They let the people come. They take rides. I mean, it's really great. Friday and Saturday nights have been fantastic. Last Saturday, it was awesome. Those are basically those things that happen in the part of the balloons show. I have a very good friend and consultant who is actually our balloon director that works directly with me to recruit the balloons. They come from all over the country. Most of them, I would say, would come from the Western United States, except for some of the commercial models. We have the Apple food can last year. It came from St. Louis, et cetera, et cetera. So here's the big kahuna right here. And I know those numbers probably scare the heck out of some of you. And I was pretty involved in creating these numbers, so I know most of us pretty intimately. But we have several levels of marketing promotions that we do. First is we call an advertising program. Let's go with the first one, print advertising. Republic is our sponsor, our print media sponsor. And the total value of that relationship is about a little over $100,000, as you can see. That includes a 12-page, 4-color program that's published and inserted in 251,000 papers that go out throughout the valley. So it's a significant piece of distribution that promotes the show in 12 pages of living color. The radio advertising and promotional value, our sponsors last year and this year again are going to be Vaudeville Broadcasting, that is the KTAR 620 AM News Talk, the Peak 98.7, and also their sports station, ESPN Radio. And they bring a huge piece of entertainment to the show as well. They have an ESPN sports van set up, and they have games, and people can sit there and watch television while they're at the air show. The third piece, television advertising promotions value, $111,690. That's basically the relationship we had last year with TV3, Channel 3. Right now we have RFPs out on the street, and we are collecting information. We have interviews with all the stations this year, and we're trying to decide which ones of these stations will be actually, if we want to go that direction, have a TV sponsor or not. If we don't have a sponsor, we'll just buy TV on every station. So in actuality, what it works out to is about $100,000 in actual hard cash we spend. And when I go to the station, I said, okay, if I'm going to give you $30,000 for TV advertising, what are you going to give me back? And so the difference between the $100,000 and the rest of that is the promotion that they provide in additional spots. The publicity is a huge area, and this is where the title sponsorship comes in handy. Not only handy, but it's crucial. If, in fact, it is not the Goodyear Thunderbird Balloon Air Classic, it will be the Thunderbird show, and the Goodyear goes away. And as much as I've tried to take presenting sponsorships and tell them to please say, the Thunderbird show presented by, when the reporters get there and, photographers and everything else, it always gets cut off. So I can't guarantee that. I can guarantee that if you're naming the title right in the front end, that's going to bring Goodyear some publicity they never dreamed about here as far as an event. And you can talk to all of our sponsors. I won't go through right now, but they're very, very, very happy with the results they're getting. 900 leads for our credit union, 7,000 tickets sold to the Arizona milk producers because of the 2-for-1 offer promotions that we put together. Anyway, what's that? Okay, I'm moving on. Economic impact, huge number.
That's why you guys are a good team, right?
Yeah, Rob, this is put together an estimate. An estimate put together by the International Festivals and Events Association up in Idaho, in Boise, Idaho, which I've been involved in for probably the last 15 years. And they use formulas that the consultants use to figure out what the heck that means exactly. I can't give you a rundown because they won't tell me because they sell that service. And that's the proprietary information. But it's a trickle-down theory. Let's take a look at room nights. We're going to generate easily 1,000 room nights or more right now. That's not including the crew that comes in, not including any visitors at all. That's participants. So we're looking at generating thousands of room nights, for hotels. Right now, we have 4 hotel properties, 3 which are in Goodyear, I might add. So there's only 1 hotel that's not in Goodyear, and that's pretty close. But anyway, yeah.
With 20 rooms only for the officers of the Blue Angels.
Right.
Of course.
That'll be
You pilot people.
Let's talk a little bit about the makeup of the audience, because I know that's important, especially if you're considering a title sponsorship. We do about 56 to 60%, roughly 2/3 of our people are going to be Phoenix residents coming in from the Valley. About 26% are going to be outside. They're going to be people from all over Arizona as well as the rest of the country. I believe it or not, I'm getting calls right now from people in Chicago wanting to know they're planning their fall trip out here for the summer, for the fall, want to know when the Balloon Classic is so they can come. I always find that amazing. But anyway, it's a broad base of people. We have statistics on that and numbers from all our pre-sales, so I can show you maps of where the people are coming from and how many are coming. And Paula's got that in the book. But anyway, she can get that to you. Okay, here we go. This is your plan. Okay. Let me see. No, here. All right. The other notes are, the other aspect of the show that's important is the kids make up about, it's probably close to half of the audience. So it's a highly integrated family show. I'd say most of the kids are going to be from young tots to 12, 13, 14, 8. That's kind of the range. So you get a lot of kids. We have a huge kid zone, inflatable zone. This year we're going to bring in a 50-foot, what do you call it, Ferris wheel. And that area is busy all the time, and the kids have a great time. We have about a 60 to 100 aviation, we call it the Aviation and Business Expo, with vendors that sell everything from soup to nuts.
The kids area will probably be about the size of a football field.
Yeah, there's part of the inflatables right there.
Now it's grown.
Yeah.
The 51-foot Ferris wheel included.
So, charitable donations, we support a lot of events. Anybody that comes to us that has a nonprofit 501c3 and wants to have some way to expose their initiatives, we give them booth space. No questions asked, as long as they're legitimate. So we host a lot of people that come in with spaces that they have some legitimate initiative they want to promote, and with us, and we do that. That was a breakdown just in I think it was 204.
It's 04.
Two of them that are not on there that are significant for this last year were the Air Force Explorers and the Civil Air Patrol, which are huge. They bring probably 100 to 150 people to the event for security, and these are kids that are teenagers, and it's a great experience for them. Now it's Neil. Okay. 60th anniversary of the Navy Blue Angels, and my partner Neil will take over.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you very much. Touching a little bit on the charitable donations, one of the things we incorporated last year was a Flight for Diabetes Mike Hunter. He is the only diabetic pilot that's airshow qualified with ICAS, International Council of Air Shows, which is worldwide, which we are a part of. And it's going to be a huge thing for those folks because there's a lot of diabetics here in the Valley. We will continue to support them again this year. We touched on hotel rooms a little bit. Hotel rooms, with the Blue Angels alone, they'll have at least 90 individual rooms for those folks for over about a 5-day period, just for the Blue Angels. That's how big it is. 60th anniversary of the Blue Angels. I actually started here with Alex, who is one of their aces. I'm a member of the American Fighter Aces Association, have been for 20 years, traveled all over the world with these folks. They're my friends. I love them all. They're great people. The Blue Angels, our signature event. We will also have United States Air Force F-16 Viper West demonstration team. We will also have the United States Air Force Heritage Flight. Those have just been added to our show, and the Air Force pays for all that. We're going to bring in some very rare warbirds, such as the MiG-17 here. We're going to bring in a Japanese Zero, which we brought in. We're going to bring in the F-6F Hellcat, which fought against the Japanese Zeros. I want to make sure the Japanese Zero has smoke canisters so we can shoot it down. We have to shoot it down. We support all of the local warbird community, and I can't emphasize that much. We have to continue those relationships. The CAF has grown to Camarillo in California. Worldwide Warbirds out at Phoenix Deer Valley Airport. We support those folks. One other out-of-state museum that we support is the Plains of Fame Chino Museum. That's my very good friend Steve Hinton, which I will be working his show next weekend. And he is the premier air show pilot. He starts the Reno Air Races every year. He is the guy who requests our show every year. So I guess we're growing. You're looking at the Collins Foundation in Massachusetts will bring aircraft to our air show. They've committed to do that. So our air show is getting bigger and bigger every year. We will continue with the local warbirds and local air show acts. This is John Melby. We also have Tim Weber. He is probably one of the, if not the premier air show pilot in the United States. This is the Flight for Diabetes with Michael Hunter. We will continue to have him. Local warbirds here. This is Hans. He has several aircraft here, including a B-25 he wants to bring. This is also another local. This is Bob DeFord. He's out of Prescott. There's the B-17 from CAF. We'll do our night glows, and we have night pyro shows. This year I've added 2. There will be 2 instead of 1. One of them, and thanks Barney very much for this, for allowing us to do this, because they don't do this at Goodyear Airport. We will have this young man here, Ken Fowler, all the way from Canada, come down here and fly for us, and after he lands his airplane, all of a sudden the show will start all over again, but you won't hear an aircraft, because it will be a glider doing night pyro, which is pretty spectacular.
No noise.
Absolutely phenomenal.
Wow. Gotta get some calls.
Any questions?
From New Mexico,
I
right?
have a question.
Let's let Paula run the show here.
Now I'm finished.
With everything?
Do you have any questions?
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Really, it's great. We're looking forward to it. Okay, I think the first one, though, Frank, you wanted to talk. Go ahead.
Yeah,
And then we'll go around.
a couple things. One, if you come to Goodyear, and this works out for us, would this permanently be in Goodyear?
We would like to see a multi-year contract with you folks. One of the things that's taken me 3 years to bring the Blue Angels back to Phoenix, back to this valley. Bringing these folks here there's a lot of pre-event, there's a lot of criteria that has to be met, documents that have to be met with the Department of Defense, CHINFO, that's the Navy Department, before they'll even consider your application to come here. And then the Blue Angels, which is the largest, they are the Super Bowl of air show acts. And if you talk to all the guys at Luke, and I'm honorary commander at Luke, they'll tell you the same thing. And that's hard for me because I'm Air Force commander. But they are the Super Bowl of acts. And being such, they can muscle you around a little bit. Want you to have it on their time, which this is what they wanted in March. And I would not do that. It's going to be in October. It's an October fall event because we want the balloons to be a part of this show. It's much better with the weather for the balloons. Plus, it's much better not to go up against Major League Baseball at that time. As soon as the Blue Angels committed to this, the United States Air Force Thunderbirds asks, could they be a part of this show on the alternate years that they're not flying for Luke and Davis Monthan. So this can really get big, so we would like to have a multi-year investment from the city.
Mm-hmm.
Did I answer your question?
Certainly does, yes, sir.
Councilmember Scott?
Yeah, this is going to be really impressive. You mentioned several of the World War II classics. Did you just mention where they're going to come? The B-17, will that be here?
B-17 will not be here. I'm going to bring in the B-25s instead, a DC-7 TBM torpedo bomber. I'm bringing in F-86, and I'm bringing in a P-38, the only air show qual P-38 in the world. The B-17 is already committed to Houston. It's the Midland Air Show, and
They don't have
that's where
anything
they.
bigger like the B-29 or anything?
The B-29 doesn't fly anymore. That's FIFI. It's also owned by the CAF.
$200,000 show, and then we can.
Yeah, and it doesn't really fly anymore.
Okay, how about some of the smaller fighter planes, the P-40 and
P-40s, we have P-40s. Like I said, I will be working the Chino Air Show, the Planes of Fame Museum, which is Steve Hinton, and he has all of those aircraft. We fly them with the United States Heritage Conference down in Davis Monthan every March, and we were down there and we flew them. So Steve wants me to come over. He's sending me a whole bunch of tickets, so I'll come over so he can sell me and to bringing those aircraft over, because I have to pay for them.
is this tied to the Confederate Air Force at all?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Holland?
Well, when Paula first mentioned this to us and the fact that we had a possibility of putting the Goodyear name out there, it's just very exciting. I think I've been to all the balloon festivals in Albuquerque because I lived over there, and as many as I could get to when I lived in North Glendale. So I'm all for it. I think it's a wonderful family opportunity, and it speaks very highly of Goodyear.
Absolutely.
It's a very family show, very, very much so. It's not, there's not a lot of alcohol consumption, I guess that's a good way to put it. It's really more family. That's why we've extended the family area this year to pretty good size, about the size of a football field.
Councilmember Lord?
I'm just looking excited toward it. It's going to be great. I've been to many, like Brenda said, and being an Air Force wife, I can tolerate the Blue Angels.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Councilmember Antonio?
Councilmember Sousa over here shaking in his boots, realizing that now there's, something, the Navy is a step up over the airports in our community for one day, if it is only one day. But 2 days, pardon me, 3 days, actually, but they'll be here for 2. And I apologize, I stepped out. So there's 2 questions in front of us this evening. We've got the sponsorship, but then there was a $50,000 question when I walked back in the room. So I'm going to ask for the 20-second elevator speech. Pardon my peers here, I apologize.
When we presented to the committee at that time, we only presented as a presenting sponsor, because that's what we had put in as a supplemental, and SRP at that time was their title sponsor. SRP later dropped out when they realized it was probably going to move to Goodyear because it's not their service area. And so their title sponsorship is available. They're out looking for a title sponsor. We asked them, what, could we possibly be the title sponsor and how much could it take? And if we would give you basically about a $50,000 more, then we would have pretty much $100,000 sponsorship. Cash plus the in-kind.
Okay, so we'd be looking at $100,000 plus 70 in-kind, give or take. Okay.
Give or take. We haven't negotiated the final.
Right. Okay.
This is to ask permission to negotiate if you want us to negotiate for title sponsor. And I want to add one thing. Barney had mentioned the airport does have a lot of input as to whether we do this show in a second year. So we really have to take into account how the airport feels about this when we're negotiating a contract.
Okay. Is there one other question?
Okay, so so there's no question tonight about whether or not, obviously it'd be great to have this thing year after year after year after year and have it fixed in one location, but that's not the question before us necessarily tonight. I imagine we'd revisit that question between now and the start of the show and or following the show. Right? Okay. I'm all for it. I'm even open to discussing the title sponsorship, depending on what our budget tolerance is. I think it's a fantastic show, and I think anytime you can bring, and this is where the generational thing will come in here, but I think anytime you can bring a military air show or a military presence and some history, for me to be able to bring my daughter out and say, this is what your grandfather or great-grandfather went through in World War II or World War I or whatever, not World War I.
World War II. Fellow council member.
I know, but I'm being serious. Our generation misses it.
I buy into the grandfather, but not the great-grandfather.
The great-grandfather? Well, it was my daughter's great-grandfather. But no, in all seriousness, I think in order to do that, I know you guys would take an insult, maybe an insult or a humor insult to that, but I think anytime we can we can do that is great. And maybe we'll even have some people buying homes on that Saturday and Sunday, and they'll realize there's a military base in near proximity to their homes, and they won't complain about it anymore. So, I mean, I think that's a very important aspect to this, and it does give the West Valley and the state an opportunity to again, show its support for
The city of Goodyear.
services. And the city of Goodyear.
If I may add, Councilman, talking about the military, in our last two shows, as in this show here, Luke Air Force Base, and we always tell all of our food and beverage concessionaires if they want to join our group, join our event, that Luke Air Force Base has first right of refusal to work the event, not their employees, but the squadrons at Luke, and they will get 8% of food and beverage cut to the OSS, who will then divvy it up to all the squadrons for their Christmas funds. On top of that, we also provide booths in areas for anyone at Luke. Any squadron can bring out and sell any of their wares. For example, I'm with the 425th Fighter Squadron, and they sell their T-shirts and hats, and it all goes to their favorite charity. So Luke is supported in a major way with this event.
Councilmember Souza.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When you're showing the slides there, I could feel a thrill, because I was trying to identify the planes that they appeared on the screen. I think I missed one. So.
You didn't miss that zero, did you?
No, that was that. I like the smoke idea, too. Those I'll tell our ink friends that. But, no, I'm excited about this, very young gentleman. I can remember years ago we did have an air show here in Goodyear at the airport, and there were tremendous crowds attending that function. At that time they had, I recall, they had the attack at Pearl Harbor, very well done, and people were just floored by how that was put on. So, those of us who served in World War II, I tell you, it does bring a chill to you when you see these planes and the activities that they still perform in this day and age. But, outside of the financial aspect of this thing, I would like to welcome you to Goodyear, and we're going to take a hard look at our budgets to make it possible for you to be here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, it sounds like there's support for you to negotiate for title sponsor, and strong support for that, I might add, Paula. Do I understand, Larry, that we've got money for everything up to title sponsor, everything on the chart, or not?
Yes, sir, we'll go over all of it.
Okay, any further discussion?
I would just add that, the coordination between the Phoenix Airport and Goodyear is excellent and continues to be excellent, and that hopefully these kind of events will occur whether we liked it or not, and we're living with each other, but I think we like it, and I appreciate I think we all do appreciate the support from Phoenix City Hall, and I'd hope you pass that along to your colleagues and to your leaders back in the city of Phoenix.
That's what we're just curious. Because the blues work better in when it's cooler. Why you do this in October rather than not do it on a cooler month?
The Blues would prefer us to do it in March. And the reason why we do it in October is the weather is better in October for the balloons. One of the problems that we had in Glendale in October, it was 2 years ago, is that, if it gets up over 5 or 7 miles an hour in wind, you can't inflate the balloons for a night glow. That's not something we're ready to accept. We want to have a night glow, and this is one of the reasons why we've added night pyro acts, too. The folks come out, they want to see this night spectacular, and we want to produce it for them. We want to show them what we can do. So an October event is much better. Second reason, we don't want to ever run up against Luke Air Force Base. We would do that if we had it in March. Every other year, we would run up against Luke Air Force Base. We will not do that.
Okay, then I think we're finished on this subject. We've got the budget we still have to do, and why don't we take a, we'll say 7:20, is 7:20 okay?
Okay.
Good seeing you.
You know something, Georgia?
Hey now. She's getting fresh with me.
I just yeah, we have this thing.
Thank you, Mayor. Report this activity zero husband, I think. I will, my goal tonight is to facilitate
Thank you, sir.
council participation. I will try to keep my comments very brief to start with this. The last two presentations that I've made, on April 17th, we discussed policy issues as we go into this budget process. On April 24th, we gave you a review of the budget process. In both of those cases, I was negligent in not introducing the budget staff that was present, and I would like to introduce them so you know who's been doing a lot of the work. The budget research manager is Joe Pizzillo. If Joe would stand, he's done a lot of work to help us there. And budget analyst Barb Heddinger. Barb, if you'd stand, appreciate the efforts that Barb's done. And then from the Deputy City Manager's Office, Elaine Schmerbeck has been actively involved with us, keeping on track and on schedule. I apologize for being negligent the last couple of times and not bringing that up. Very briefly, in this, the objectives of what we want to do, I want to answer a couple of the questions that came up from my last presentation. We're going to review the revenues briefly. We're also going to review the operating revenue allocations, which will address how we spend our money and as compared to the fees that are being charged. We already have some proposed adjustments, including discussions earlier this evening that we will be reviewing with you and how those can possibly be funded. The remaining budget schedule, and then council discussion. So with the first chart, and the charts that I handed out to you are out of order. I just reviewed page 3 of that. We're going to go back to page 2 and the revenue projections. And
You didn't do the math in the same order, did you?
I did not do the math in the same order. That's correct. I used a different computer and sorter for the adding across and for the percentages. These are the operating revenue projections used to prepare this budget. And in the left-hand column, we have the revenue category. The very top line is the construction, or the city sales tax for everything except construction. The first column is what is in the fiscal year 05-06 budget today, which for that item is $16.7 million. The next column is what is projected for fiscal year 05-06 actual based on data that we've received up to this point in time. And in the city sales tax category, that is $17.6 million. The next column is what have we included in the budget for fiscal year 06-07 as the budget has been presented to you. And for the non-construction sales tax, that is $20,350,000. That represents a 16% increase over what we are projecting our actual to be this year. That is a lot more aggressive than we have been historically in making these estimates. That is, if you will, our best guess. As we talked about, as we passed out the budget to you, we talked about that we were a little less conservative in the revenue items than we have been historically, and this is an example of that. The construction sales tax, the next two lines, I would worry less about the -79 and the +60%. Those two combined for $13.8 million. That's what we are projecting for this year, and we are projecting that to remain the same in next year's budget in construction sales tax. Primary property tax is projected to increase by 30%. Of that increase, the major portion of that increase in percentage points is primary property tax coming from new construction. We will review that in the budget hearing process when we have the truth and taxation hearing, that we are required to disclose the amount and the percentage
points, if you will, for that increase, as I recall, is 5% of the 30% would be coming from existing population, and the remaining would be coming from growth. We'll go over that in more depth as we get to that point, unless you have questions. The state shared revenues is the one I wanted to point out to you. This is the one variable that we have left in this budget. You'll notice that we are showing an increase in state shared revenues of approximately $3 million from the 0506 to 0607. That $3 million reflects an original estimate made some time ago on the impacts of the 2005 special census that we hired throughout Maricopa County, and where we thought we would be within that census. That census was supposed to be complete by this time and to give us full revenue allocations at this time. However, it is not complete. At first I had heard we would have something by April 1st, then May 1st. The latest I saw is July 1st. So I want to give you an update on what this number means and where we think it will be. This number is, this $3 million higher is based on actually lower population estimates for Goodyear as compared to the rest of Maricopa County than what the DES estimates, were for 2005. Very conservative numbers. The DES estimates would generate, for all cities in Maricopa County, would generate for Goodyear a number about $2 million higher than this.
Than the 9.4?
Than the 9.4. If the Goodyear population comes in at the DES estimates. The preliminary numbers that we saw had Goodyear higher than those DES estimates, with other areas in the county lower than the DES estimates, which means that we would actually come in with a higher percentage than this. Those numbers are being challenged. But our conservatism is that I believe that if we use the DES estimates, which is an additional $2 million to this number, that we are still in the area of conservatism as we do this budget for this year. The water fees and sewer fees include not only growth, and sanitation fees also, they include not only growth from estimated new houses, but they also include rate increases. For water and sewer, those rate increases would take effect in July, and for the sanitation, those rate increases would take effect about December 1st. Oh, okay. Excuse me, let me go back. Okay, building and zoning fees were included in the 2005-2006 budget at $9.2 million. Our estimates right now are about $13.2 million for this year. We have retained at that level at this point in time. There are two variables for a majority of these fees, and those variables are the permits as well as the rates. Now, the permits are often based on valuation. The residential valuation actually is done through the Uniform Building Code, and that is scheduled to be updated in 2007. That would not benefit us at this point in time. There is some potential, as we analyzed all of our revenues, for some more minor fees that we are looking into. Most of them were updated in 2004, but those fees would not be a significant portion of the total picture. Operating revenue allocations. What this chart presents is the operating expenditure budget charged out to the various revenue sources. In other words, the city sales tax, what do we use the city sales tax for? What do we use in particular? This is a response to the question asked at the last meeting of where are we on the building and zoning fees as compared to what our costs are. And so that's the column I'm going to show in there. Community development, engineering, economic development are primary uses for those fees, but in addition, a portion of the fire and the police services are charged to those fees, as those are services that we have to provide before the tax revenues start flowing in for those types of basic services.
So that's your gap. That's your gap measure, in essence, for maybe operating years.
That's correct.
Through 5.
It takes 2 years to 6 years before they will generate generally tax revenues.
And we do that based on building and zoning fees.
That's correct.
Is that pretty common practice throughout the state? In some growth areas?
I think that would be common practice. That would not be abnormal. If you aren't doing that, I think is where you run into the risks of the financial struggles during slower periods that you see as the building permits taper off. Your revenue should be coming up. And I think by allowing it at this point in time, you're allowing the revenues to catch up with that.
Revenues going up, meaning you have more home base, so you have more sales tax revenue.
Sales tax revenue, property tax revenue, and so forth. A number of adjustments have been proposed since we presented the budget to you. And I'm going to review these page at a time, not line item at a time. I want to tell you that these total approximately 20 items that I've shown on the next 3 schedules, but those reflect approximately 100 to 150 line items within the budget process. So for us to move the budget model, it is like steering a ship. When we turn it, it doesn't quite turn as fast as we would like it to. And so this is to give you an overview. We're keeping a running tab of types of adjustments that need to be made as we present you the final budget. All of this, of course, is subject to your input. The first category is replacement vehicles. In the department requests and the first processes before that were completed before we submitted, there was confusion on several replacement equipment items as to whether or not they qualified when those vehicles were not literally going to be taken out of service. We have added those back into the budget process. Those would be funded out of the depreciation reserve that has already been applied. The next category are carryover projects. These are not capital improvement plan projects, but other carryover projects. For example, 2 police vehicles that have been ordered, but due to the time frame of getting the vehicles after the end of the year, they will not be received until we get to 2006, 2007's budget year. So we carry those items over from one budget year to the next. Those items are funded by, in effect, fund balance. They're funded by the 2005, 2006 unspent portion of that budget. Capital improvement plan is left out of this. Over the next couple of weeks, we'll be reviewing the capital improvement plan with you, and as we now have a 5-year funded capital improvement plan, the 2006-2007 amounts do include carryovers, and so there should be very little that we have to reflect for carryover projects on that basis. The next items are proposed additions to the operating budget. In the economic development area, we missed one of our development agreement reimbursements for about $300,000, which was not included in what we provided. The community services the public arts specialist. You recall that when the public art discussion was held, that funding of a new position, the city council suggested that they would like to see that added to the budget. Here's where we're keeping track to that. At the bottom, we have some additions that are more one-time in nature. The major event sponsorship was what you just discussed. If the council is willing to go that direction, that funding is shown here.
Is Is the city report mailing, is that what we get in the West Valley View? Is that what?
No, this would be a special mailing to all citizens. This would be cost of mailing to all citizens, special city report. Instead of, go ahead, Bart.
This would be taking it out of the West Valley View because we're only getting 40%, 46% readership. So we're missing over half of our population. So it's taking it out of the West Valley View and mailing it directly in home from now on.
Okay. Look at 40%.
The special event funding of $15,000, that number actually tonight was presented to you at $8,000. That was a net number between the in-kind and the cash contributions. Both of those items are included in that special events budget as it was presented because of the in-kind is actual out-of-pocket costs for us. The West Valley Arts Council acceleration, as you'll recall, they asked for an acceleration of the commitment of the $250,000. I believe there was discussion to accelerate $100,000 into next year's budget, as well as an additional $50,000 in the current 05 between now and June 30th to fund to help accelerate the payments on that particular program. How would these items be paid for when we've presented you with a balanced budget? Propose a couple of items in this dialogue to fund that.
Larry, point of clarification. I think you just stated $100,000 and $50,000 as opposed to 100 and 100. For the West
You already paid 50.
Already paid.
We originally paid 50. We have a balance of 200, and we'll pay it in two payments. 100 by June 30th and 100 by December 30th.
I thought it was 200,000.
It is. And do we have a legal opinion on it? Yeah, can we do that?
Yeah. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. Waiting for some feedback from Fine Arts Council. Ms. Richards was out of town last week. She's supposed to get me a list of tangible benefits the city would receive. To plug into the legal opinion that will circulate hopefully at the end of the week.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you on that clarification. These adjustments, the one-time expenditure adjustments, I would propose that, if you recall, we included in the funding in this budget $2.7 million in the revolving fund for special projects, council projects, et cetera, which would include, the reason it was originally put at $3 million and then reduced to the 2.7, we included the I-10 widening as we go forward out of that source of funding. As most of you know, the I-10 widening project is not going to cost as much the first year because it's just engineering services. That left us with $2.7 million. And this $345,000, if the council would choose, could be funded out of that and keep the budget in balance. In addition, in this category, that would increase by the discussion earlier this evening on the Human Services Campus for the $6,400. That would be in this category, which would bring that total to just over $350,000 for those types of expenditures.
You would add that to one-time expenditures, or
Yes.
you would add that to, okay, even though
We
it's a
would-
multiple year?
That's what it says.
I think I would put 3 years of one-time in the budget as opposed to putting it in an annual expenditure to achieve the same objective.
Okay.
The operating items, my proposal on funding the operating items would be that we use a portion of the surplus that we talked about in the state shared revenues that we are projecting. Out of that conservatism, we could use a portion for that. That would leave in that item we aren't real sure where it's going to end up, but using my $2 million to begin with, that would leave $1.6 million. A couple of options the city council would have to consider on that $1.6 million is, one, waiting until those numbers are determined, and after about 3 months of the year, city council having an opportunity to review the budget at that point in time for that remaining $1.6 million, as well as any other revenue adjustments we might see. To, I guess, the city council, and then do that for the actual amount adopted, or that we collect from MAG. That could also be rolled into special projects. We have a lot of capital improvement projects that need to be funded, and that would be an option for the city council. Briefly on the budget schedule, our plan was to have this as a council dialogue. I know the hour's getting late, but to get as much input from you as possible. We had on the schedule, if the council desires, another work session to discuss the budget on May 30th. Otherwise, the tentative budget is scheduled for adoption before the city council on June 12th. June 26th would be the public hearing, truth and taxation hearing. June 26th would be adoption of the final budget, and July 10th would be adoption of the property tax levy. So with that, I apologize, I went a little longer than the 15 minutes I intended, but I would like to really turn it over to city council discussion, and both on the schedule as well as anything we've brought up to you.
Okay, thank you. Just a quick question before we go around. What's our contingency fund right now? We had $20 million. What is
The contingency fund in the budget, which I'm referring to as the base of the revolving fund, is $15 million, and that is budgeted as an item by itself, not to be spent, but as to be shown in the budget.
I guess I'm thinking of a cash balance of over 20.
Okay, cash balance. That cash balance entering this year is it 39?
Wow.
No, in the general fund. I think we're projecting that was, it's either 29 or 39. I have to look going into that year. And we're projecting that we spend that down with the one-time projects as well as the capital improvements plan, because that's fund balance money, down to the 15 that I mentioned. I think I confused.
So you're taking the cash balance of 29 or 39, which is a big difference, and spending it down to 15 through one-time expenditures or CapEx?
Right. Through one-time expenditures or capital expenditures or capital improvement plan out of the general fund. That's correct.
And you will ask us authority to do that when you do it, though.
That is part of the budget as presented.
I thought the budget had 84 million or whatever of expenses and 84 million of revenues. Revenues and expenses for the year balanced.
In the operating budget, revenues and expenditures balance. The cash balances are used in the beginning balances and brought down in this process to an expected level at the end of the year. So the actual number in the general fund alone was 39 million. Total projected cash beginning fund balance was actually closer to 90 million. This reflects 78, and the difference is capital. I'll go over. That 39 million, general fund only, so we'll keep it there. That 39 million, as we've presented, would be 15 million at June 30th of next year if all capital expenditures were completed at that point in time. If the city council wants that number to go higher, we can reduce the capital expenditures to achieve that. But as presented, yes, it would be spend it down.
So it's not just sitting there, it's going to be working for us.
That's correct, except that 15 million is set aside that would not be spent.
Aren't we bonding capital requirements?
There is projected in this for approximately $30 million of bonding for this upcoming fiscal year. That is actually the same GO bonding that we had in the budget for 2005-2006. Due to the fact that we have not completed the projects that we sold the last bonds on, we're holding off selling those bonds until the projects get far enough to be completed to meet federal tax requirements.
I guess I didn't know that you were going to be using a substantial amount of cash for capital requirements that we could borrow for. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, we would be using cash for capital items that we could borrow for, but that cash is general fund surplus over and above the $15 million that we've talked about as a as an amount that we would set aside annually. The borrowing, if we do additional GO borrowing, would increase our debt service payments, which would reduce our primary property tax and increase the secondary property tax. What I would like to do as a precursor to next year's budget session this fall, before we sell any bonds, is to have a work session just to discuss debt management.
Sure.
I'm willing to do that at the May 30th meeting if the City Council would prefer we spend more time discussing that issue at that time. I can be prepared for that.
I guess, I hate to continue this, but I'll let someone else talk here. I don't understand that the budget stated, you're implying that the budget includes this. I didn't understand the budget that we're going to approve that says that the decision whether we use cash or bonding has already been made. That's basically what you're informing me of, that the budget as it is drafted says that we're going to use X amount of cash for capital requirements, which is maybe a good thing to do, but I don't think that we discussed that. I don't think we discussed whether we use cash or borrow.
That is the purpose of these discussions. You're correct. You have not adopted the budget as presented to the City Council, and until you adopt it, that decision has not been made.
Okay, then when does that decision come? I mean, when does that work session or discussion as to whether we use cash or we borrow?
If you would like that, if you would like to spend more time discussing that, we can do that at the May 30th meeting.
Yeah, I don't know that we spent any. I missed that session, I'll tell you.
You know what? You're not the only one. So,
This is not a change, Mayor, this is not a change in process for how we have done the budgets. In the past, the surplus fund balances were allocated to capital and one-time projects. They were not used to fund operations so that you didn't become dependent on the one time. Keep in mind that some of the source of that surplus is the conservative revenue estimates that we were doing in the past. If you noticed on that revenue schedule tonight, we're showing we're going to have $7 million of additional revenue in the general fund over what we projected. That is part of this cash that we're talking about.
I guess my only point, and I'll let someone else talk, but I think if we want to go, I didn't know we were over 30 million in cash. I thought we were in the 20s. I was really proud of that and happy about that. If we're going to go to 15, we've got to make a conscious decision we're going to 15.
Yes, sir.
That's the point, I think.
Yeah.
You know, and it furthers the discussion then, is that 7 million, just because maybe our projections were wrong, to be treated as one-time revenue? Because to me, we had this discussion at the last budget session about employees and,
That's exactly
and
right.
operational expenses and that sort of thing. And here we are tonight, and I see now, and maybe I'm just seeing it in greater detail because we're going through this, but I see now 7 million in revolving revenue that you're considering one-time CapEx, but in my mind can be, 2 more fire trucks on the, I don't know, I mean, I'm pulling numbers out of my head. But I mean, it could be a fire truck on the street, it could be, it could be a lot more positions serving the public to some extent. Am I missing something?
Let me address that. To use that money for operating expenditures, it is money that only exists once. We collected that money last year. We have increased our current revenue estimates to take that into account.
Okay.
So if we increase our operating costs this year and do not have an increase in future years, we would not have a source to continue paying that cost. That's why we try to keep the one-time monies to fund capital and so forth.
Sure seems like our revenue modeling, though, then is coming up awfully, I mean, and it's tough, because you're in a growth mode. I mean, you never know when you're going to come in, what looks like now 10% shy of what, I mean, your budget was 10%, 12% shy of what your projections are now. So, I mean, I guess that's a significant handicap to play with every year as we move forward. If I make that same assumption this year, which is a dangerous assumption, we'd be at 93 next year. We'd be looking at another 7 or 8 million, and I'd be saying to myself, gosh, you know, I could have had another police officer on the street, I could have had more code compliance, I could have had, you know, another couple more paramedics, I could have had a city center project going underway, which would be a one-time expenditure. But, you know, so I'm going to be kicking myself.
Could have had a tax cut, we didn't mention that.
Well, you know, we already did that. We've done that, Mayor, and you had those the year. But we're growing fast, and folks are asking a lot of us.
Well, let's go around the table, everybody. Frank, you.
Well, the only concern I had with a specific item in there was vehicles, and I don't know if this is feasible. It's just I'm looking at that saying, in my mind, I know each department has so many vehicles, and it's spread around throughout the city. Wouldn't it be more cost-effective if we had just a general motor pool, with the exception of maybe the mayor and...
We have a motor pool. We do have a motor pool.
But it specifically stated in there, well, I put it away, but that it was a car for a specific department.
Economic development.
Okay. And I assume that's what we had going, was that we just had a motor pool, and then whatever, if the car was available, that was, but we don't have that spread out that way, is that right?
We have certain departments that are higher users, economic development, community development, that have cars that are allocated to them. We have other departments, finance, as an example, that do not have cars allocated, that actually use the pooled cars. We have, I believe there are 5 pooled cars that are available for a number of departments, much in the concept that you're talking about.
Oh, okay, so we do that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Councilmember Scott?
Yeah, Larry, I'm not easily confused, but you've been successful. I'm not unfamiliar with this budgeting thing, but I'm really confused now. The revenue flow is changed since the last time we had a presentation. We had a balanced budget last time, as the mayor just pointed out. Now, suddenly, if I'm interpreting this right, we have a windfall. We have unexpected revenue here, unanticipated revenue. Is that correct?
The state shared revenue specifically, yes,
Okay,
sir.
well, that's one part of it. So therefore, if my simple little head is on the right track, I'm going to conclude that our revenue flow is this week more than we anticipated 2 weeks ago. Is that correct?
On the state shared revenues, it's higher than what we've presented.
Yeah, okay. Therefore, in answer to my question that I asked a couple weeks ago, if we can go back and reevaluate our revenue flow and indeed find out that we are underestimating this revenue flow, therefore, I would like us to take a look at this magic number of 60 employees as opposed to some additional number. Are we going to go there?
That is up to you. That is why I presented that to you tonight.
I think that's what we were asking for 2 weeks ago.
And that's why it's here.
Okay. Well, so we haven't finished with that subject.
That's correct. That's your call.
Okay, good.
Mr. Mayor, Fred, I think that in part, the information he's sharing with you about state shared revenues has only been available in the last week.
Is it only been available because it's suddenly a rainfall, only been available because we reevaluated the revenue flow and discovered this?
You want to answer that, Larry?
We've been reevaluating that revenue flow, and quite frankly, on this one, I have been aware of this estimate being conservative. I have been expecting the actual numbers. I expected them to be here well before this session, well before, quite frankly, the April 24th session, that we could have an actual number to give you and not just a revised estimate.
You're talking about the census figures.
The census figures, that's
So
correct.
when we get all done with this, we will take another look, the council will take another look at total revenue flow, and then we can make this decision as to exactly what we want to do with the number of employees.
But the revenue flow that I presented tonight, as it relates to the state shared revenues, I'm hearing it'll be July 1st. We have to adopt a budget sooner than that. So if the city council wants to address that issue, that's why it's out on the table for you to consider, that $2 million. Will that be the final number? No. I don't know what the final number will be, but I think from the estimates, using that DES estimate,
it's going to be at least
that it should be that number, that we should be comfortable using it.
Okay, have we, going back to my question 2 weeks ago, have we now reevaluated all of our revenue, and this is going to be what we're going to live with?
That was what we presented to you this evening.
Yeah,
that's why I went through that with you. That is correct, yes. We have some other revenues. We're looking at minor revenue sources to see if we can tweak it up and rate adjustments.
Okay, so if we do come up with something, it'll really be small potatoes.
It'll be small potatoes, that's correct, sir.
Mr. Mayor, Fred, I think the other point is that if we'd had the numbers sooner, we would have come back with a modification and a proposed list of additional positions and said, we're comfortable bringing this forward to you. At this moment, not knowing what that final number is going to be, we were kind of moved into a secondary option, which was to come back to you in September based upon the final numbers, based upon the reality of what the census numbers are going to be.
Or assume that they're going to be at least what we know now and maybe more, maybe higher.
Yes, so, one of the things that we could do over the next couple of weeks is to go back and bring you, using these numbers for a moment, we could bring you $2 million worth of additional proposals.
I'd like to see it.
Based upon your focus, your interest. Is it positions? Is it programs? Is it funding other types of things?
Okay.
Do you want us to get back to the $20 million base reserve, et cetera, et cetera? I mean, all those.
I think it's an all-inclusive. What do you think, Mayor? You think you can't separate out these entities? We have to know the dollars we're dealing with, what we have, and are these real numbers? I don't think we could separate out any one item.
Well, but you as a council have some, quote, preferences as to how you would like those funds applied in a priority scheme, and if you could give us those priorities, then we can work to bring you back a proposal.
Sure, you could just give us the options, and then we work through those options.
And before I relinquish my position here, could I ask another question?
Yes.
I'm not going to get a turn. Are we going to say no?
Question, Council?
Capital improvement projects. I know we have that big bulletin board, and we look at that all the time, but if we approve a particular project, does it ever happen where, that's a loaded question, is it likely to happen that project gets booted down in favor of another project without this council knowing about it? Or would that always come before the council?
Jim, you want to address that?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Scott, the reprioritization of projects, if that does occur, would occur annually as we bring the new CIP to you. So we wouldn't do a mid-year change or shift without coming to the council. And as will be happening early next month when we come with next year's CIP, we will have some projects that may have been scheduled for this year that have either been carried over because of timing, schedules, et cetera, or that we're going to be requesting that they be pushed out further in favor of something else, but it will be completely with your support and council's direction.
They're the key words, with our support. So any capital improvement reprioritization will come before this council before it happens then?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Holland?
Larry, is this the largest working cash that we've had available in the history of Goodyear?
Yes, I believe it is. beyond the 39 million in the general fund, there is additional capital-specific monies, including impact fee monies, including previous bond issues that have not been spent yet, that our total cash balances today are approximately $100 million. Hopefully, they'll get spent down soon.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was looking for. And so the idea would be that you guys would come back with some options to spend that money down.
The capital improvements plan that you saw in January will be presented, and you will be seeing again before you adopt the budget with those items in there, which will have the recommendations with all of the projects and how they're funded. That is correct.
Okay.
Good. Okay, thank you.
All right, I'm understanding what's going on. It's a little bit clearer. Thanks.
I'm going to take a little bit different direction. Last week, when there were a number of positions, it's actually your fault and your fault. I want you to know that. Yeah, okay. Because you said, you asked them twice, were the positions correct in what we were approving this year? Did we need any more employees? You know, was there the funds for these employees and so forth and so on? So, you know, my little expression was, it's not a perfect world. Well, then I got home, and as many of us do if we finish a council meeting, we go home and we question what we've said and question what the decisions we've made, because we certainly want to make the best decisions for the city. So I reviewed it again, and then the weekly highlights came out to the mayor and council, and it sort of set up a red flag for me. And then I pulled out the city manager's report, and that's sort of another red flag, and it has to do with a specific department. I'm just going to push it out to you guys, and it's just some of my uncomfortable feelings. Community services. I'm looking at code compliance alone, and then I read in this, in the report, it says code officers work Saturdays collecting illegal signage, resulting in 19 illegal signs being removed in Centralia. And Canyon Trails, they did a lot. In Centralia, there were 25 violations, and in Canyon Trail, they had 31 after only inspecting part of the subdivision. And I'm going, oh, okay, so that means that didn't get done. So, and then there was and all this happened at one time, and this is a project that I've been wanting to do, and I just made an appointment and went in and talked about it. And to find out that it's great, and they would like to have more neighborhood projects and bring the community in, but you know what? We don't have the employees to take care of it. So I want us specifically to look into that department to bring in a couple additional positions. If we have, as you stated, the revenue flow, which might be able to add a couple employees to our city. So I just throw that out to you, and if we can have that discussion at the next time, I would really appreciate it.
Councilmember Antonio.
A couple questions, just so, I'm assuming we're going to have a work session on the 30th. It sounds like we are.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make this assumption, and I'm asking some questions. When I look through the recommendations, because I'm sure we'll all go home and we'll look through this and try and come up with $2 million in expenditures for you, whether you like it or not.
I'm happy
But when I look at this, I see the columns here, and I'm looking specifically in the proposed budget, and then it's got the number, the name of the project, the FTEs, the department priority. When it does not have a department priority next to it, who determines that it's in here? Because I assume that, like, if I look at, not picking on you, but I know you know this because it's your area, finance, and I look in budget and research area, and I see council projects, $2.7 million, which is funded, and then contract procurement software for $59,000, which is not funded, and neither one have a department priority next to them.
That's correct. In those cases, some of them that do not have those priorities were projects that were added after the initial, the 2.7 million being an example.
Okay.
It's like, we've got to get this in here, we just put it in, didn't need to put a priority with it, and so forth. In some departments and divisions, you'll see a division priority and not a department, or a department priority and maybe not a division.
Right.
That's all how the data got input in certain cases, and it just used that information, I think, amongst other information in the analysis.
Okay. And then I can ask, well, no, I'll ask this. How do I, in terms of some of the capital expenditures, like the fire department, we impound fees for capital expenditures at a future date, or from developers. Where does that balance show up year to year?
The balance will show up in the...
Assuming we don't spend it in, say, year 1, 2, but we're going to spend it in year 3, we're collecting it over those 3 years.
The balance shows up in specific funds that we keep for non-utility development fees. Those balances are projected in this report at $16.6 million to start the year. Excuse me.
Well, we have it shown in here.
That is correct. It's in the proposed budget tab. The sources and uses in that tab shows each category. Now, that just combines all of the non-utility development fees. There's a lot more that goes into that. That's all part of the capital improvements process that you will be seeing before you adopt the budget. There's more that goes into it because the impact fee can only pay for the growth portion of that item. Fire truck might be an easier example, whereas many of them, only a portion of it is growth-related and other portions are not. And the portion that's not growth-related has to be funded to be able to spend the impact fee money.
Right. Okay. I'm bewildered and looking forward to the discussion about the difference. I mean, further discussion about that difference, the 39 million and the 15 million.
Okay. Councilmember Souza. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The question I put to you 2 weeks ago when we reviewed the budget was, is there any slush in this budget? What I'm hearing tonight, could this be called slush?
The state shared revenues? Yeah, that is money that is available for your
But you
consideration.
didn't know this at the time I asked you the question.
I was hoping for accurate numbers.
No, there's no reflection on your answer.
You know,
We didn't know this at the time you gave me that answer, that there's no slush.
well, yeah, I didn't and still don't consider that slush until it gets the final number presented before you. And I think the real answer is, do we have hidden pockets of money? The real question is, do we have hidden pockets of money elsewhere in there? I wanted to make sure that you knew about the state shared revenues, because I can't give you a straight answer yet. We want that out on the table so I can give you my best estimate. The same
And I think what we're asking you is to make sure that if there is this excess in funds, let us know so we can spend it diligently on personnel or equipment.
Or a tax rebate, as the mayor would.
No. Mayor knows how I feel about reduction in taxes at this stage again.
Don't have enough conservatives on this council.
No comment.
I forgot to echo Georgia, and I want to go on the record as echoing what she said. I support wholeheartedly her discovery in the process. I don't think I said that following her comments.
Okay. It's still your turn, though.
Oh, I thought you were done.
Oh, okay. Is that it? Yeah. Means adjourned.